Ahead of us tonight, so to be respectful of everyone's time, we're going to try to kick things off as close to 6 o'clock as we can. We do have a quorum present, so we will officially start the meeting. I am Lauren Rose. I'm the Assistant City Manager here at the City of Sachse. Thank you all for your service. I know that we have asked a lot of your time over the next couple of weeks, but it is for a really important reason, so we do appreciate that. We've got a couple of housekeeping items before we get started, one of which is the oath of office, which allows you all to conduct your business, so very important. So just to kind of discuss a couple of things, some of you have probably attended meetings, council meetings, boards and commission meetings in the past where we follow Robert's Rules of Order. We're not going to do that here. We want this to be about the conversation, not the process. But in saying that, I ask that everyone please be respectful and try to maintain some decorum. We've got a lot of passionate people in this room. We might have different opinions, but we all agree that we care about the City of Sachse, so I do ask that we just try to be polite. Certainly okay to get into a discussion, that's what we're here to do, but let's not talk over each other, let's not yell, let's not throw things, etc. So,
yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I guess that's off. I guess that's off. We're not going to do that now. Okay.
These are plastic tables. It wouldn't be great. And they're new. So I appreciate everyone abiding by that. We have pizza. We will feed you. It's probably going to be a little bit of a long meeting. Feel free to get up, get what you need, grab drinks. There is a restroom right out here. Feel free to use those facilities as you need to. If it seems like we need a break, I will give us a little bit of a break, but otherwise I'm going to try to get us to power through some of these conversations because it is tedious work. So with that, yes. Does anybody want to lead us in the invocation and pledge? And I don't
we don't have
a flag here. So
yeah, I realize that. I can pull one from my computer.
I can do a digital flag. Okay, Kirk.
You want an invocation and pledge?
Sure. We did 1-2 punch.
Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for all of these wonderful people who are willing to give their time for the city and think of others as well as themselves. And I ask that you just give each of us wisdom and grace and honor. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Sorry about that. That's okay.
We'll have a flag.
Yes.
Okay.
Before Leah gets to the oaths, and then we will kick off our business, there's a lot of people in this room who know each other through crossover on other boards and commissions and just being active in the community. There's a lot of people who don't know each other. So I'd like us to start by introducing yourself and what brought you to Sachse, because that's kind of the unifying piece that we all have here together. So, Mr. Mathis, I'm going to start with you.
I'm Jim Mathis. I've lived in Sachse for 8 years, and what brought me here was a lovely redheaded young lady.
Glad to have you.
Amen.
I'm Jeannie Martin. I have been in Sachse since 1998, and my husband brought us to North Texas. We rented in Richardson for about 9 months, and then I told him it's either going to be Sachse or Rowlett, and I made the right choice.
I'm Scott McMurdy. I was actually raised in Sachse, and so I've lived in Sachse 25-ish years of my life. So this is home.
My name's Butch Kipper. I moved here from the beautiful city of Marble Falls because my daughter said, come up here and be involved in your grandchildren's life. That's all it took. I've been here 6 years.
I'm Ed Brown, been living in Sachse since 2001 after I retired from the city of Dallas. That's what brought me here. When I retired, I had built a house here, and that's where I decided to live.
Yeah, I'm Eric Dominguez. I'm from South Texas, I lived here in Saxe for about 11 years now. What brought me here was family and really the community, the area, and others that we knew lived around here.
I'm Kirkwood. I moved here in 2005. What brought us here was we were visiting Chance Lindsay and we saw kids playing in the street. We had a newborn and we just thought, that's very unusual to see kids playing in the street back then. And so that's why we actually came to Saxe's. Kids in the street.
That's good.
My name is Carlos McGee. I moved here in 2009. My employer relocated me to Dallas, and the realtor, the relocation plan, we kind of toured this area. Plano was saturated, came to Saxe and just kind of, it felt right. So I bought a home, and this is where I am.
Get some pizza. Marty Hobo, been here since 1999, born and raised in Garland, so I've always been around.
I'm Billy George. I've been in the area since 2005, associated with the city since 2008, lived here since 2012, so about 10 years.
It's longer than that, Billy.
What's that?
It's longer than that.
No, it is. It feels longer than that.
Cedric, do you want to catch up or you want to go last when we come around?
Yeah, Cedric, please introduce yourself.
So, Cedric Alford, been in Saxe, I guess you just said how long we've been here.
Yes.
About 21 years now, and on the UDC board as well.
Thank you.
Paul Watkins, moved here in July of 2000 from North Plano. Was looking for some place quiet to live. I thought my real estate agent was bringing me out here to kill me because it wasn't out this way when he brought me out here, but I'm glad I'm here.
Hi, my name is Marcy Daniel. I've been here for about 14 years. I got lost. That's how I landed here in Saxe. Just riding around. We had just sold our home in Mesquite and wanted a place that was really quiet. Both of us, my husband and I, are from small towns. So getting lost was wonderful. And the day we got lost, we looked at a home, and next thing I know, we were buying and building.
I'm Charles Elk. Jeannie, we moved here in 1998 as well. Lived in Garland for a few years before that. And my wife and I had small children, looking for a little different environment, a little bigger place, and so moved out here with a bunch of fine people, great neighbors.
And I will have the staff introduce themselves as well. Obviously, this is a discussion amongst the commission, but we will be here throughout the whole process. We'll be facilitating, answering any questions, and we're kind of your go-to resources. So I want you all to know us and to feel like you can contact us and reach out to us. So with that, I will turn it over to Pete.
I'm Pete Smith. We've been your lawyers longer than Mayor Felix has been mayor. So now you know how old I am. I live in Richardson. I ended up there because my ex-wife and her father picked that house, and I don't have that house anymore, but I live about 10 minutes away, so I'm close.
I'm Leah Granger. I'm the city secretary, and I have just been with Saxe for 2 years, right around 2.5 years. Yeah, It's been wonderful. I live in Rockwell. This is a very close and similar community.
Hi, I'm Amanda Chi. I'm the assistant to the city manager. I'm coming up on my 1 year with Saxe.
Mike won't introduce himself, but Mike is our IT guru, and he is making sure that the meeting is handled from a tech perspective. You will notice the giant camera in the corner. Because we couldn't have this meeting in our council chambers, we wanted a way to provide residents who can't make it to these meetings to hear the conversation and the dialogue. So we've got this recorded going. You will see that there are microphones. These are called boundary microphones. They are super sensitive. We've tested them. You can hear the clicking on your phone, so just be mindful of that. But we wanted to provide people with a way to hear the conversation if they can't make it. So with that, again, I am Lauren Rose. I'm the assistant city manager. I came to Saxe by way of the city of Mesquite. And this is my second charter review process, so I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation here. and I look forward to working with you all. Pete, our city attorney, has quite a bit of experience with charter reviews in the different communities he represents, so he has a wealth of knowledge. And with that, I will turn it over to Leah to lead us in the oaths of office.
All right, great. If we had everybody stand, please raise your right hand. You won't have to repeat after me. We'll just raise again. Do you and each of you swear that you will faithfully execute the duties of the Charter Review Commission of the City of Saxe, State of Texas, and will, to the best of your ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much. You all have an oath, a document at your desk, at your spot. If you could make sure you sign that and then return that to me before you leave today, I would.
We're going to let y'all hang on to those. Just make sure you don't leave without either leaving it at your spot or dropping it off to Leah. Thank you. All right, so the next item of business on our agenda, and all of you have agenda packets at your locations, is consider and elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson of the Charter Review Commission. Is anyone interested in serving in these capacities?
Yeah, it's not going to be like, you know, high school, nominate somebody, make a motion and to appoint, and you can do a slate. You can say, I move that we appoint so-and-so chairman and so-and-so vice chairman. Either way.
Or at least indicate an interest so we know where to start.
Well, I got a question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. What are the responsibilities of the offices that the person would hold?
Just like the mayor and mayor pro tem. So the chair will run the meeting, control the dialogue, recognize speakers, and so forth. Just maintain the dignity of the meeting. The vice chair will perform the duties of the chair when the chair is not here. In the event we don't have the chair or the vice chair that night, we'll have to elect somebody to be the chair for the night.
Yeah, so I've worked with Scott McMurdy in the past very closely for a number of years, and so I would motion that Scott McMurdy be the chair. That's okay with others.
Any objections or a second? Or
I'll second.
Okay.
Hold on just one moment.
Motion
Eric
by.
made the motion
And Jim seconded it first.
Thank you.
He was quick, but first second.
And Leah, I'd like to put myself as consideration for vice chair.
Okay, well, let's finish this one first.
All right. Yeah, we'll take a vote on that. All in favor of Scott McMurdy as the chairperson for the Charter Review Commission?
Please raise your hand.
All those opposed? Okay.
Okay, now you can do it.
Yeah, question.
Yes,
You
sir.
mentioned
And you
order.
can move to
Yeah, I get it.
yourself.
I get it. You mentioned order. Are we talking about Robert's Rules of Order? What do you describe it?
I'm sorry, Cedric. I mentioned that a little bit before you came.
Okay, got it.
We are not going to follow that process
Okay,
for the
understood.
sake of everyone's sanity and for the sake of the conversation.
Okay.
Sanity.
We're going to let this be kind of an organic conversational
Got it.
setting.
I just didn't want anyone to say point of order.
All we ask is that we just try to be polite and have a little decorum.
So if everybody understands what the motion is that's being made,
Okay.
so there you go.
So we have a motion for Cedric Alford as the vice chairperson?
Second.
He made the motion. Okay. And
I'll second.
Kirk second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All those opposed? Great. Okay. Scott, since you
All
are
right,
the
you ready?
chairperson, the floor is yours.
Okay, I guess the next item on the agenda is just citizen input. So if we have any people sitting behind me with input or like a chance to say something before we really get rolling into this. No?
Okay.
All right.
And we
So-
did not receive any comments.
Not receiving any comments outside? Okay. All right. I guess this would be item 7, review, discuss, make any recommending changes to Articles 1 through 4 of the City of Saxon's Home Rule Charter. Do I need to read the background, or is this because we're not going that
No.
technical, don't need words so
No,
much there?
and everybody was provided with a packet. And
Okay.
hopefully, everybody did their homework. And just for the benefit of everyone here, we've had several charter elections out here, and so it's been fairly worked over pretty good. There's still a lot of things that could be cleaned up, like grammar and that kind of stuff, or being gender neutral instead of saying his or her, that kind of stuff. But it is expensive to have a charter election. It costs a lot of money, and it also, at least last time we did one for, I forget which city, they were charging based on the number of propositions. So anyway, it's been we've been through it a lot, and so I would recommend just kind of go through each article and see if anybody has any comments or questions or recommendations.
All that being said, sorry to interrupt, this is your process. So if you have concerns about things that are listed within this document, this is our opportunity to discuss them. And if the consensus amongst this group is to take it forward and say, we recommend these changes, that is absolutely your right as this commission. So don't worry about cost. We can be judicious on language and number of propositions if there's some collaboration that we can do, but the point is for you all to talk about what's in here and what you are comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So let me start then, if I may.
That's just can I ask a quick question before we get into this?
Well, as I say, before we just start reading through some of this, if we can, let's take a few minutes. Those who have questions, if you have a question, you might, okay, how exactly is the process going to work? Or is there something general before we get into the details so we know? So if Eric, if you want to start, and then Cedric got one, so go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, this is even before the actual charter.
Okay.
So as far as the oath that we wanted to have signed, it says signature of board member. So is that, because we're really technically not board members.
You're a commission member.
We're a commission member, so we're an officer, but not a board member.
They're kind of interchangeable.
It's a generic term.
Okay, just, and by the way, you probably have already kind of, I may have more questions.
That's great.
That I'm gonna bring up, so I just wanted to be clear on that.
Okay. Cedric, you had a question?
Yeah, just the structure of what we're trying to accomplish here. I know that there are like 5 or 6 meetings that are scheduled.
Correct.
And it's one thing to ask everyone to say what we want, to change and things of that sort. And that's a little less structured. And I'm just curious of how do we plan to use the other week? So if we all say, hey, we're cool with it today, does that end this process now?
What I would say is we've laid out a structure and a framework to keep us, it's sort of written like a curriculum, right? We'll follow that curriculum, and that's designed to keep us organized at each meeting. I would ask that we try to tie up a topic at the end of each meeting so that we're not coming back and constantly revisiting things, because we'll have things that we'll need to prepare on our end. Certainly, if an emergency comes up, we can revisit anything that you would like, but for the sake of moving through the process, let's try to wrap up a topic at each meeting.
Understood.
Okay. Other questions? Marty, and I'll come here to Gene.
I don't know if anybody's going to have any problems, or I don't think anybody has any problems with the fact that there's a lot of he's and hims and hers in here. And can we just take a vote and have staff go through here and change all the he's and hers to gender neutral?
Right.
And just slide on past all that and kind of
Sure.
get to the bigger ticket items?
Yeah,
because I don't want to, if we sit there and berate all the pronouns, I'm going to put paper out.
We have recommendations that we will make to you all at the end of this process relative to truing things up, relative to grammar, to fix some of the inconsistencies that are in there. So you all don't need to debate on that.
Right, yeah,
We'll
or
make
pick
that
them out of the
recommendation,
reading.
and if you all are comfortable with our recommendations, you can take a vote on that.
Okay. Gene,
Pete mentioned a charter election. Is this going to trigger a special election, or will this go on the November ballot?
It's planned to go on the November ballot, and so when we complete the process and you have recommendations, we'll have a report. That'll go to the city council, and the city council can pick and choose what they want to do or not do anything. And then they'll call election on those propositions of they want to do, and then be a November election. And then they take effect after that.
This process is designed to put you all in a pipeline for a November election, if that's the direction that you want to go. So we're being mindful of state law to make sure that we don't miss any deadlines. We've tried to build a schedule that gives you plenty of buffer. So if you need to have additional conversations, if you want to really work out your report to council, you have plenty of opportunities to do that.
Okay. So let me ask just a couple additional questions that if all we're doing is changing grammar, does that trigger an election because you're changing things to gender neutral? Or is no, that's something that can be done without?
That can be one proposition.
Okay.
Shall all of these sections be amended to correct grammar and or gender?
Okay.
So, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare people about the cost.
No. That's I just want to make sure, just so we know, because as we go through this, you say, hey, if all I'm gonna do is change pronouns, are we? Okay, great. That's one thing. Versus I'm going to change, or I want to recommend a change of a statute or something.
Exactly.
That's a different thing. So, but no matter what, if I change a word on it, there's something going to the ballot. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
Okay. As a commission here, once we are then going to make a recommendation to the city council, and they then have the option to say we're going to go with your recommendation, or no, we're not.
Or pick and choose.
Or pick and choose.
Or modify, right? Or modify.
Okay.
They can add their own.
So this works as recommendations in the same way like the bond committee did to the city council, just so that everybody understands kind of where we're at. What we say doesn't necessarily go, but we have been chosen by members of the city council to represent them and the citizens in this. Okay? All right? Any other questions before we start trying to jumping into it? Billy, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
On that gender neutrality thing, I noticed over in in section 11, they do address that, where they say that throughout the charter, where it says he or his, whatever is meant to be both sections.
Applied across the board.
So do we want to go through and change them all, or just go with what is stated in section 11?
It's really a policy issue.
I'm throwing that out to the crowd.
So for example, if we pick 3 or 4 sections that you make a recommendation to the council on those sections, we'll take the trouble to clean up any of that kind of language in there at that time. So we do it piecemeal, because the last one Richardson did, we had 84 propositions, so they all passed. But that also included cleaning up grammar and stuff. So, and it's it gets time consuming, a little weary at the ballot box. 84 propositions, oh my gosh.
But there could be one proposition replace all the he and him with gender neutral.
Right. There may be some sections where there's some awkward language that's not just changing he or she, but generically we could have one proposition that says that, and that's so. That may be one of your recommendations to the council, is that consider a proposition, amending these sections to clean up the grammar and the gender stuff.
Okay. I'm going to suggest we defer the decision until the end, so we know what we already have.
I would agree. Any other questions?
Just so we're all understand, what would be the format? What does it look like to get consensus? Is that a simple motion and vote on a particular matter, and once that has done that and the commission moves forward, does
Yes.
revisit that?
That would be my understanding, is once, and I guess, as we get done with each section, I think we could, because my preference, and if people will be okay with it, is once we get done with the section, we're not going back to it. So if you want to say stuff about it, let's get it in. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves back and forth a lot. But at that point, we say, look, this is what we think ought to be changed within that section, and entertain a motion to say, okay, these are things we want to put into, because we've got to do a final report to the city and our recommendations, correct?
Right, and we have some rules.
Okay.
At the last council meeting, we put forward a resolution that kind of outlined the discussions that had occurred to date relative to this commission, its structure, which much of which was covered within the charter, as you're all aware. But relative to the majority, the approval of the majority of the members present at a meeting is required for any approved recommendation to the city council. Does that clarify?
Well, we got to agree on what it is. Majority needs to agree on, here's what we're going to present to the city. So maybe a better approach is we go through each section, say we're done discussing, here's what the proposed things we may do, but at the end, we'll have that to say this is our final recommendations to the city, to the council.
I'm not comfortable with a single at the end.
Okay, you'd rather, as we go
I'd
section.
rather, if we want to change section 2.02, we come up with the basis of what we want to do. We yay or nay.
Okay.
Sometimes we may need to come back to it the next time because staff might need to clean up some of our language. But from there, it's just a quick, it should just be cleanup from there.
Yeah, what we'd anticipate doing is, let's say out of tonight's meeting, you come up with one section that you want to revise, and you have a motion with some proposed language. We'll go back and redline that change for you and clean it up if we think it needs to be cleaned up, and then you'll have the opportunity to approve that revised version if it's
At our next meeting. At the next meeting.
Yeah.
Would that work? Okay, then.
Yeah, that's our plan. That's
Any objection to that way? As we go through each section, if there's a change, we come to call it consensus or majority and say, yep, we're okay with that. Give it to city staff, so if they need to redline it. At the beginning of our next meeting, we go through, here's the red line things from our previous meeting. Is everybody okay with that? So we can move on to the next. Is there any objection to that?
And what we can do
Okay.
is we can attach the red lines to the agenda items and have those posted so everybody has an opportunity to read them in advance of the meeting and the public has an opportunity to read them as well.
Okay.
I would request that as you get them done though, you go ahead and forward them to us.
Okay, we can do that.
So it's not all stacked up at the end.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when we say majority, are we talking, so I believe there's 15 commission members, is that correct?
Correct.
So that means it would have to be more than 50%?
It's the majority of the members present. So we have to have a majority of the 15 here to meet and conduct business. So then it's, to pass something, it will be majority of those members present.
We only have 14 here tonight because Mr. Ford is not able to join us.
So it would take 8 votes.
It would take 8 votes
Correct.
to say, okay. Right. All right. Any other questions, just proceed? I'm sorry, go ahead, yeah, please.
Does staff have already a list of things that they found that should be covered by the commission?
Yeah, what we'll do, each grouping that we do, is we'll go through and identify anything that needs to be required to be changed because of law. And we may provide recommendations about some cleanup items. Like I have a list of, but it's gender neutral grammar and some stuff like that. So the most important thing is for you guys to go through it, make sure that if you have some changes or don't have some changes, and then we can go through what we have is what I call cleanup items. But if there's something that has to be changed because of the law, we'll provide that memo or recommendation to you ahead of time.
Well, I was more interested in a comment from staff that says, we've looked at this and we think you need to pay attention to section 2.04 because it has this in it and that's causing some difficulties.
Sure. So aside from grammar issues, which I'm a grammar person and there are some issues in this document, so I have to point that out. Aside from those, there's really only one section that I've been made aware of, and it's not on our agenda to discuss tonight. It has to do with the city's audit process, and it really just has to do with kind of a functional
That's
issue.
the item, that's the sort of thing that I'm
Yes, and
looking
I will
for
bring
because
that
we
forward.
wouldn't know to do that.
Right.
Correct, and I will bring that forward to you all at the time that we discuss that item, and I'll bring you some information and may potentially invite particular staff members to speak about the issue, just so you all have the context.
Okay.
But I was planning to do that section at a time, because it can get a little overwhelming. Some of these issues are overarching, and there's a lot here, so.
Okay.
As long as everybody's comfortable with that, that's the plan I'll follow.
All right.
Great.
Any other beginning questions, then we'll jump into this thing.
So the only thing I would suggest is, and to someone's point, somebody pointed this out, I believe it was over there. Section 11 is actually the wording interpretation. So although we may want to go in order, we should probably look at that one first because we're already talking about this, and then go back and start from the beginning. Wording interpretation has to do with, again, the gender neutrality, as well as there's some other content here that speaks to the period of time. So there's a couple words that are being used throughout the document that we probably need to consider before we jump into it. That way we don't have to spend time as we're going through the whole document.
Well, Article 11 covers a lot of topics.
So you're thinking 11.05.
11.05. Wording interpretation.
My only concern about that is it's not posted on our agenda to review tonight.
Yeah.
So just in keeping true with our agenda, I prefer that we stay within that.
So then back to your comment, Scott, about if we're gonna go down and just sequentially go through the document, when we get here, it's gonna be something that's gonna have to be, we're gonna have to go back to all these other sections, because there's a good number of gender
officer
items that are in the whole document.
I think that's something you'll probably decide at the end, whether you want to make a recommendation regarding that, in which case you might eliminate part of 11.05.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at.
So,
okay.
And there'll be a recap, at the end. So it won't be like, the whole idea is to finish a section or sections, you move on to the next one, you get a consensus on that group, move on to the next one, and then to the extent we have to go back to reconcile something, that's certainly your prerogative.
Right.
Okay.
As opposed to go back and re-debate what was overruled by the motion at that time.
So perhaps bear in mind that section 11 might address some gender things. So as we're discussing things, we can make some mental notes so that we're prepared when that section does come up.
Okay. All right. Anything else that's pressing for somebody? I want to make sure Rick's a chance. All right. So let's jump in. I guess we can start the preamble. I know there's a lot of pages in here. I think probably the best thing is we got to read it. Just read it one time over. Has everybody's had a chance to read it? I hope. But read through it. If there's something that's glaring to you that says, "Hey, question on it," please raise your hand. I want to make sure everybody. Again, don't hesitate to share your opinion, your thoughts, but remember it's their opinion, their thoughts. We don't want to jump on them. We want to do what we can and not belabor the point, but make sure that the point is made so we can all discuss it from there. That makes sense.
Which is benefit. There isn't anything in Articles 1 through 4 that have to be changed as a matter of law.
That was my next question. For matter of law, everything's fine.
There's
Now
one
it's just a
item
matter
that
of-
I'll bring up when we get there, something for you all to talk about and consider, or two items, but it doesn't have to be changed.
Okay, so everything's legally okay,
Yes.
1 through 4.
Yes, sir.
Now it's just a matter of do we want to change anything or recommend changes?
Yes.
Okay? All right, so Paul Watkins, would you mind just reading the preamble? We'll just take pieces, we're going to read through it. Again, if something comes up in that section, please raise your hand so we can say, hey, got a question or thought.
Okay.
Would you please?
Recognizing that effective government is a government of law, we, the people of Saxe, Texas, establish this charter as the basic law of our city. This charter will provide a home rule government which will recognize and protect individual freedom, encourage interest and participation by the citizens, and serve in behalf of the general welfare.
Okay. In my reading of other city charters, this is pretty standard across a lot of the charters. Any questions or anything related to the preamble for anybody? Okay, let's move on. Article 1, 1.01, Incorporation. Marcia, would you mind reading 1.01 for us?
Sure, absolutely. The inhabitants of the city of Saxe, within the corporate limits as now established or as hereafter established in the manner provided by law, shall continue to be a municipal body politic and corporate in perpetuity under the name of the city of Saxe.
Okay. Again, any other concerns there? This is it's short compared to a number of other cities' charters. But brevity is okay with me.
Yes.
If it's legal, I'm okay with it, but anybody else have thoughts or concerns? Okay. 1.02. Mr. Elk, would you mind reading?
So we're not going to change the name of the city?
Just to see if city council's listening, can we put that into one of the recommendations to see how? Okay.
The municipal government provided by this charter shall be of the council, city manager form. The council shall consist of the mayor and council members elected by and responsible to the people. The city council shall appoint a city manager who shall be directly responsible to the council for the execution of the laws and administration of government of the city.
Okay. Again, any concerns in that area? Let's keep moving through it. From boundaries of the city, 1.03. Billy, would you mind reading that one for us?
Glad to. The boundaries of the city of Saxe are those heretofore established and now existing, or those boundaries as may be changed by ordinances and proceedings of the city enacted in accordance with this charter.
I have a question there.
Yes.
That's rather vague. Is it common to just have it that vague, or do we really define what those boundaries are?
Well, we do define the boundaries, but that section is fairly standard.
Okay.
You're going to see almost the same words in all charters. And just for your benefit, Mr. Nichols, who was a big patron of our firm, is now dead. He wrote most of the charters for a lot of the suburbs, so you'll see a lot of the same old language.
Yeah.
But it's standard, and it's more than
They don't
adequate.
give more detailed description because it could be changed.
I get it, and I think we need to just kind of establish, just because everyone else doesn't do anything differently, doesn't mean that we need to abide by the same.
No, that's true. But annexation
That's a
is
good point.
controlled by state law, so if we had a provision in here that was inconsistent with state law, the state law would control that.
Understood.
And the legislature keeps changing the rules on annexation because developers like to do that. I know Billy knows that from his days, so.
Okay. Good point. Thank you. No, appreciate it.
I'm sorry, was
Go
there
ahead.
consensus on that one?
Are we okay on that one?
Okay.
Okay. All right, 1.04, annexation and disannexation. I'm just going to go down the line there. Marty, would you mind reading 1, 2, and 3, 4? I guess we go 1 and then see if there are any questions on any of these things.
Annexation or disannexation. Number 1, the boundaries of the city of Saxe may be enlarged and extended by the annexation of additional territory or decreased by disannexation in any manner and by any procedure now or hereafter provided by law.
Okay. Any issues there? Again, that one's very similar to other cities.
It's very standardized language.
Okay.
Question before
Yes.
we move on. If there's any records or any documents or procedures that we didn't receive as we were reviewing this, is that fair to ask for that type of information for us to review?
Okay. Number 2, Seth, would you mind reading number 2 for us? 1.0 or just of section 1.04?
Sure. Upon completion of the annexation procedure, the annexed territory shall become part of the city, and said land and its residents shall be entitled to all rights and privileges provided by the city for its citizens, and shall be bound by the acts, ordinances, resolutions, and regulations of the city.
Okay. And then Carlos, you read 3, unless somebody's got a question on 2.
If after the day of annexation there exists land within and adjacent to the corporate limits of the city of Saxe, not receiving governmental or proprietary services of the city within the time required by the service plan or chapter 43 of Texas Local Government Code or its successor statute, then a majority of the qualified voters residing within the particular area may petition the city council to disannex the area as provided in chapter 43 of the Texas Local Government Code or its successor statute.
Okay. Questions on that one?
So is it just me, or does it, on the very first part there on number 3, if after the date of annexation there exists land within and adjacent, so we're talking about 2 different lands here, correct? It's not an or. It's not a possible or there. It's an and.
Right, and it has to do with the use of city services, so I think that's referencing properties that might be within the corporate limits but aren't using city water or city trash services, wastewater, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's two different groups, but within the same category of use
So
of
there's
city
not one or
services.
the other, it's and, that's what.
Is that right?
Yes.
I think that's to do with extrajudicial.
Okay.
Yeah,
Question?
Just a quick question. What's the service plan?
Service plan is a plan the city comes up with on the timeline to provide police, fire, water, sewer services.
Is that something that because we're signing off on this, but it's not referenced or anything?
It's provided by state law, and that changes from legislature to legislature.
Okay.
That's a document that's generated at the time of annexation.
That's correct.
But chances are that'll never happen.
Correct.
Well, it
Because
does
we're
happen.
bumped against all
People
the
get
cities.
annexed
Somebody's
in.
gotta be de-annexed before we
People
can
get
annex.
annexed into the city, and they're promised water or sewer, whatever
Right.
it is, and they don't get it, and they want to get back out.
But every
Not
land
okay.
next to us is already in another city, so it's not very likely.
We
It's
have
not-
some unincorporated Dallas County.
And it's not true.
Do we?
Yes, but it's very small, and annexation is pretty challenging these days, so
And is it next to us?
it's off of Pleasant Valley Road.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's very small, very small.
Any other questions?
Yeah, but that's how Garland got their landfill.
There's a really interesting story behind that.
And they named it after their former city attorney.
Yeah.
Which all
We're gonna
occurred-
cut that one off quick because there's a lot that goes into that one. I'm gonna.
I know all the stories.
That one I know too much of that one, so yeah, but
That
but
occurred
he is true.
around the time of the charter.
Yeah,
So-
he is correct. So, okay, let's move on to section. Well, I guess
Yes.
in light of kind of the idea for Article 1, what we're hearing is no changes, no recommendations of changes. So, is there a motion that we approve that? Hey, leave that one as is part of the
Second.
Kurt, second, and Billy, or motion, and Billy second on leaving section 1 or Article 1 as is. Any discussion or questions? All in favor, leave it alone. Any opposed? Looks unanimous to me. All right. One down, 800 to go. Article 2, powers of the city. 2.01, general powers of the city. Just as a quick comment, in preparation for this, I went and read about 6 other city charters, just trying to see how everything flows together. And again, to your point, Cedric, just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean we need to. But for those that haven't, when you look at A, B, C, D, and E in these things, that is very, very common across every charter that I read. Just so as you read through, say, wait a minute, is this normal? It is. Not to say we can't change something, but just for point of reference for everyone.
And it may be the state law requires those.
And that was part of the question that
Probably what we should have talked about before at the beginning is, what is the charter? You know, the charter's like your constitution. So you had an election at the time, once you had population of 5,000 or more, and you voted to adopt a charter, which made you a home rule charter, which gave you full power of self-government except when limited by the statutes or the Constitution. So for cities that don't have a home rule charter, general law city, they have to look at the local government code to see what they can do and how they can do it. A home rule city can do whatever it wants to do, that's lawful, of course, unless there's a statute or the Constitution prohibits it. So this is just more of an expression of your home rule powers.
Okay. Thank you. So let's read through it just kind of really quickly again, but if you've got questions, please let us know. Kirk, would you mind writing that first paragraph here in 2.01, please?
The city shall be an incorporated home rule city with full power and rights of self-government as provided by the Constitution and the laws of the state of Texas. These powers and rights shall include, but not be restricted to, the powers expressly conferred and permitted by state law as presently written or hereafter amended. The city shall have the powers described below.
Okay. Eric, if you'll read A through C for us, and then we'll stop there.
A, to enact, establish, and enforce codes, licenses, and ordinances for the interest and well-being of its inhabitants and for the maintenance of good government. B, to cooperate, with the government of the state of Texas or any agency or political subdivision thereof, the government of the United States or its agencies, for any lawful purpose of the advancement of the interests, safety, convenience, and welfare of its inhabitants. And C, to exercise the right of eminent domain, the right of extraterritorial jurisdiction, and to have exclusive dominion over all public property in any manner permitted by the Constitution and the laws of the state of Texas.
Okay. Questions on any of those?
And just a wording question. I noticed that we start using inhabitants versus citizens. Is inhabitants more inclusive of like citizens and business owners, et cetera?
Citizens, and it's just a term of art. I mean, inhabitants could be citizens. Citizens refers to people who live in the community. Okay. So the charter will not be consistent in those terms. None of them are, but there's no distinction between.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is that if we're going to make some corrections later on terminology and everything else, at least we can look at being consistent if there's no, material difference.
I'm personally not a fan of eminent domain except in extreme situations, and I found examples in other cities where they specified when the city can use eminent domain. Ours is very broad.
And it's trumped by the state law.
So state law says the city can invoke an eminent domain whenever they please.
So in fact, you probably remember the famous U.S. Supreme Court case about suppose they changed the rules about condemning property for economic development purposes. Well, that had been the law of the land throughout the country for over 50 years. So it wasn't a change in law in that case where they upheld that eminent domain acquisition for that. I think it was a shopping center. But many of the states, including Texas, enacted legislation because there was such an outcry about that, so that cities can only condemn property for a public purpose, and that public purpose cannot include economic developments for, water, sewer, land to build a building, that kind of thing. So it's constrained by state law.
Question? Thank you.
I guess just a question for me. Well, we were looking at making some changes when I was on the EDC. Is that one of the reasons why we couldn't kind of, take some of that property right there downtown because of that?
Well, you don't have any eminent domain, the EDC doesn't have any eminent domain power, and the city can't acquire that through eminent domain.
That makes sense now. Okay.
Yeah, because that's for economic development purposes.
Okay.
Just one other point.
That's a good question.
Back to the inhabitants question. It would be a person or animal that lives in or occupies a place. So it's not just citizens.
So different.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll make a note of that, may come back to that as we talk about terminology in section 11. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments on that area? Let's go to D and E if we can. We'll keep going down the road. Down the row.
To contract and be contracted with, to sue, to buy, sell, lease, mortgage, hold, manage, and control such property as its interests require. To establish, maintain, improve, alter, abandon, or vacate public streets, rights-of-way, sidewalks, alleys, squares, parks, and other public ways, and to police the use thereof.
Any concerns on those items there?
Can you explain D a little more?
Which one?
D.
D, to contract, be contracted with, sue, buy, sell, lease. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's just saying that.
It's very broad.
I'm sorry?
It seems very broad.
Well, when you adopted the charter and you got all the powers of self-government except as limited by the Constitution and the statutes. So you got to remember the city is like a corporation. Corporation can buy, sell, lease property. So that's all it's doing is clarifying and illuminating the fact that the city can enter into contracts, can buy property, lease property, license property.
Okay.
It's remembering that we can do, because at home rule, we can do just about anything we want until this tells us we can't.
Until this tells you can't, or the state law.
Or the state law says you can't, see what our Constitution says, so, okay.
So to be honest, you could even eliminate much of that, but I don't recommend you do that. But I'm just saying, we're a home rule city, we have so full power self-government except limited by the laws of the state of Texas, the Constitution, which means you got everything except when the statute says you can't.
So the state laws is really, if it's more restrictive, that's what needs to be followed.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Good point. All right.
And even if the issue is not enumerated in our document here,
State law.
state law still controls it.
Right.
Correct.
All right.
Okay. 02.
02. Public improvements.
Do we approve that section?
Do you want to, well, I was just going to go all the way through 2,
Okay,
because that's just that
okay.
one page, yes. Yep.
Public improvements. The city shall have the power to construct, maintain, within or without its corporate limits, streets, flood control facilities, and sanitary water and storm drainage facilities in, over, under, and upon all public property and easements granted for that purpose, and to levy assessments for the cost of such improvements. The city shall have the power to collect attorney's fees for the collection of paving assessments in foreclosures cases as allowed under state law. It shall have the power to cause liens to be established for the purpose of securing such levies, and shall have the power to compel the use of such improvements by the inhabitants of the city.
Okay. Questions on that one? Again, that's another item where it's very similar to a lot of the other cities.
I do have a question on that. I'm just not clear, paving assessment and foreclosures. Would someone just tell me what that is? Paving assessment.
Historically, cities have, by state law, had a mechanism where they could improve streets and assess a portion of the cost of those streets to the abutting property owners, and put a lien on that property, and take what action state law would allow at that time to foreclose on that property to secure payment of that lien. Cities rarely do that anymore because we have impact fees and we have other things, but that's a historical feature, and it's not. I can't remember. Billy. I can't remember. I can't remember any city in the last. I'll say 30 years. I don't want to say 40. 30 years doing that.
Do they still have the power to do that?
In some cases they do, but once again it's controlled by state law.
So this is in state law, this wording and
That historically is from state law. Yes, sir.
Can be done still, even though it's not something that has been used for 30 years.
Right. Nobody on the council wants to put an assessment on their neighbor's property.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Carlos, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to help me understand the power to collect attorney fees. Does that mean pay it?
The statute would allow for the assessment of the cost that benefited your property. It gets complicated, but the idea was that if they had to foreclose and they had to collect it, then if the city had to hire a lawyer to collect it for them, they could collect the attorney's fees as well. Just like on collecting your delinquent taxes.
Okay.
Same thing.
Thanks.
Creature of the statute.
Just a question on that, and I think it's to Marcia's point. You know, we kind of dove from public improvements to really just calling out pavement assessments, which is very specific. Are there other aspects of what we would be able to get reimbursed, attorney fees and all that? So meaning, is this, like really too limited, and should it be more broad?
It's not too limited, and it's really talking about two subjects. It's talking about the city having the ability to acquire property for water and sewer outside the city limits, for example, and then it talks about paving assessments. They get run together in that same section. But the only time that we can collect attorney's fees is if there's a statute or a contract, that allows for it. Other than that, we don't have any ability to collect attorney's fees.
I will point out
yes,
that it also allows the city to require every home to have water and sewer whether they want it or not.
well, that's.
It basically says that they can require the use and they can charge you accordingly. So, and this has been used by other cities to say, yes, you have to have water and pay for it. There have been cities that have taken legal action against homeowners
who said, well, I don't want city water.
Yeah, but that wasn't based on their charter, that was based on their development regulations that required you to connect to the water and sewer system and not have a septic tank. And county has regulations for septic tanks, and so, but those cities, when they were pursuing that kind of action, it wasn't based on their charter, it was based on their development code that required connection to water sewer. And some cities allow septic tanks on certain areas and certain size lots.
Isn't it state law that actually governs the lot size of the
Right.
city is actually superseded under certain conditions
Right.
where they can't prohibit it.
Right. The folks in Austin have severely constrained what local government, what cities used to be able to do. It was getting stricter and stricter every year.
Okay. So I think this is, I mean, a very good discussion and discussion topics. One small that to me maybe it just kind of jumps out at me, but foreclosures cases.
Awkward language.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Foreclosure
I say strike out that S on foreclosures.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things like that.
Is that somewhere you're just making a note for us then?
Yeah,
So
we're
we
taking
can-
notes.
Okay, thank you.
Poor Leah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay, 2.03 Miscellaneous Powers. The city shall have the power to establish and maintain the ordinances and regulations governing the use of lands within the city and to enforce by all lawful means these ordinances and regulations within and without its corporate limits. The city shall have the power to authorize, regulate, and inspect all construction and existing structures within or without its corporate limits, consistent with state statutes, and to establish and enforce ordinances and regulations concerning their use, construction, and reconstruction. The city shall have the power to license and regulate persons, corporations, and associations engaged in any business, occupation, profession, or trade when authorized by state law. The city shall have all powers granted by any section of this charter. Any questions or concerns there?
I guess for me, just when you say persons and corporations, does that cover all businesses, whether it's LLC or?
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Aside from the grammatical item in 2.02, any changes to this, to Article 2? Okay.
Second.
Motion to leave as is from Eric and Carlos with a second.
Yes, sir.
All in favor? Any opposed to it? It's unanimous.
The removal of that S, right?
Yeah, with the removal of the S. That's a grammar thing. We're going to have to figure out how we do this. That's where we're going to see how creative we can get so it's not 84 items on a ballot.
Understood.
Okay. Article 3, City Council. This one gets a little bit longer, and there's a lot to this one. What's that? There's a stink eye on that one. Okay. Let's jump into it because I know I'm going to guess there'll be a fair amount of discussion in this area. So
Appropriate, you should get
I feel like the timing on this was incredible, so. Do I
okay.
get 3.0?
Gina, if you'll read 3.0 on the composition, please.
Okay, Article 3, City Council, 3.01, composition. The City Council shall be composed of a mayor and 6 council members. Each council position shall be designated as a place to be determined as set forth in section 3.02 of this article. The mayor and city council members shall be elected at large and shall serve for a term of 3 years as prescribed by the Texas Election Code and until his or her successor has been elected and duly qualified. Elections for 2 places shall be held each year, and the election for mayor shall be held every 3 years. If the candidate with the highest number of votes in an election receives less than a majority vote, then a runoff election shall be held between the 2 candidates receiving the highest number of votes. Such runoff election shall be held pursuant to the provisions of the Texas Election Code and applicable ordinances.
Okay. Start their questions.
And is this where we insert term limits?
No.
No.
That's later on.
Awesome. Bring it on, Pete.
No,
When you say later on, which section?
That's my question.
Seems like that was.
There is no term limit section.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, it seems logical that it would be in that section, but if not.
Oh, it could go to 3.0, whatever.
Yeah.
Or 3.18.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
With this, I guess there was a lot of discussion in council on whether or not this gets brought up by this committee or not. And should we just like take the vote right now and say, hey, do we want to put it in or do we want to pass and see if the resolution passes? And then that can map our path forward.
When you say put in, what do you mean?
Whether or not we're going to handle term limits in the charter review or not put it in the charter review and have it to see if her motion gets the amount of votes to put it on the general election.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of apprehension on council's part that they didn't want to have the hot potato.
Can I make it, and I misspoke, it would be in this section, but what I was going to suggest is, since that's a hot topic, or maybe it's not a hot topic, that we go through Article 3, save the question about term limits, and then come back to term limits after we finish Article 3.
Well, I think there's a lot in here that's going to happen.
I think there's going to be a lot of
issues,
so I would,
My thought is, go ahead.
Go ahead.
In following what he's saying, I make a motion that the issue of term limits be included in our discussions and possible recommendations to the city council.
Second.
And I second that.
Okay,
I would also second.
So we got a motion and a second.
A motion by Butch, a second by Marty.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
To include that in our discussions.
Can I make a comment?
Please, yes, before, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, please.
I think it's important that we do not change, the procedure we agreed upon at the very beginning just because it's a hot topic. If it's something that I think that the citizens want to discuss and we feel that it's appropriate to discuss it in a particular section, I think we should be able to do that. Because there may be other issues that come up that's going to pause us every single time. Because there is one that I want to bring up a little bit later that may not be a hot topic for all, but I think it needs to be addressed. So I'm just saying that we already had the procedure set. Let's not stop it just because it's something that's potentially controversial.
I wasn't suggesting you stop it.
I
I was
know you're good,
suggesting
yeah.
we get through the rest of that meet and then come back to that topic before we move on to Article 4.
Okay.
And let me remind you that I was there that night and I didn't hear the council did not say you can't talk about term limits. Okay?
No, it didn't.
It's whatever you all want to talk about and make a recommendation on. So you're free to do that.
Yeah.
So don't feel constrained by the politics of what you think they thought or did say, because
And this is a non-political commission, right?
hopefully so.
Okay, Bill, you had a comment, then we
It's just an observation. I mean, the way I read the resolution that was passed in light of the oath we just took, the council directs this commission to review all the articles in all parts of the charter and make recommendations on those.
So can I?
So I think the motion's on the table and it's been seconded. It's consistent with the resolution itself and that both we've taken already. So just an observation.
So I get, for those that made the motion, okay, we're going to discuss it. Okay, we can vote. Is anybody against discussing this?
That's right.
And all four, make sure it's part of the discussion. Raise your hand. All right. Any opposed? Okay, so we'll put that in. The timing of it, I think. Again, we can do it how we want. We're gonna have to put a time limit to how we discuss this because we're gonna go for the next 3 hours. So I don't want to do that. So I do think there is a little bit of validity saying, let's go through some of these other. I think there's some areas where we can move through that information. If other items come up, let's kind of see where we're at. But we won't finish this section without having a proper discussion about term limits. Are we okay with that?
You're saying go on to section
Let's look at
3.2.
3.02. We know that term limits will come up there because when it's all said and done, term limits are going to fit in composition, or it's going to be another 3.03 or 3.01.1 or whatever that is my guess.
And Scott, I have maybe a general question
Okay,
that will
please.
come up, but I would like to know and understand more about place versus district, ward, precinct. When is there a time to have that change, if that could be a change with, under the home rule charter? You know, I just want to ask that question so that I can understand and be better informed about what our council people run under, you know, at large versus district, you know, so.
Good question. Now is probably the time with that because it sits with composition.
Okay.
And then go ahead, Marty, and then we'll come into that.
Has everybody read the current resolution that's out there? Is everybody aware of that?
The what? The petition?
Yeah, the petition.
Oh,
No. May I suggest a Jeannie Reader petition?
See, and I hate to say this, but this gentleman right here hasn't read it. So this discussion may very well go into the next meeting.
why don't we-
Honestly, I haven't read it either, and if I can just say, if you don't mind, for me, term limits is something that I think is relative to the charter as opposed to what anybody else feels about it. I think it's a relevant conversation. I'm just afraid that if we introduce something that the city doesn't have access to, that may introduce other issues here, because we're bringing in another document.
By it doesn't have access to, do you mean that we're not aware of it, or we haven't?
Well, I'm just
seen it?
saying, we're talking about Jeannie's petition. I think that we can have a independent conversation devoid of that, just on the basics and the merits of term limits. If that plays into it, that's fine. But I don't really think that, you know, for me personally, I haven't read it, but I have a strong view about term limits.
My personal view is I don't think we need to read the petition because regardless of what it says, we're going to have a discussion about it. So
That's the starting point, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not starting from day one.
A starting point for some, but not
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it's the gorilla in the room, and you need to recognize it.
Well, that's why I suggested we get through the easy part and then come back to the gorilla.
Because I don't want to get ourselves where we're at 9 o'clock and it's like, wait, no, we still got a section and a half to figure out. But I want to make sure we give it the due time because I know it's important. It'll be interesting to see. Hopefully, we can come to some kind of semi-consensus or just going to be majority as to what we present.
Yeah, and Chairman, I know
Okay.
we have 3 hours, but we also have several meetings.
Yes, we do.
You know, so we have the time.
Yep.
That's a great point. And if we don't get to a discussion tonight, we can move it to the next agenda. We can add
Okay.
things to the agenda. I do think we should adhere to the rules that you adopted, which is if you voted on something, let's try not to re-discuss it
Right.
unless there's an emergency. But yes, the floor is yours, and you guys can handle this how you would like.
Can I start by, do we even just take a quick poll? How many people think there should be term limits?
I think
we all want to discuss it,
I think it's
so,
an excellent
I mean,
idea.
where are people? Who thinks there should be term limits?
I mean,
That's my
it's
question.
a non-binding vote.
Is that my decision to say this?
About to say, Chairman, make a decision.
Yeah. I think no. I think it's.
And then we'll.
I think you can get a feel for what people like, but I think we're jumping the gun. I think.
Well, I think that's unfair what the gentleman next to me said. He said, and then we'll ask for a new chairman. I think we need to respect the role that you've been placed in and just kind of give us some direction.
Yeah,
So what discussion do we have if we don't know I mean,
well,
I just say, you know, because there's some people here, I don't have a clue how-
Nobody said we're not going to talk about it.
No,
All I was saying was, for example, Section 302 is historical in nature. It doesn't even need to be in there anymore.
Which is one of the things I wondered, could we
Right.
just simply remove it?
Yeah.
Right, and correct, and eliminate the reference in Section 301 to 302. So all I was saying is, the rest of that doesn't have anything to do with term limits. So if we could get through the rest of Article 3, and then come back and tackle that gorilla, we will at least gotten the rest of Article 3 done, save and accept term limits, and then come back.
I'm okay with it.
That's all I was suggesting.
my preference, if you'll just go with me for a minute, let's move. We know term limits. We're going to spend a lot of time on it, but let's move through some of these things that we know are going to be easy or going to be more just quick. So we move through that. You know, frankly, there could be a little more contention with term limits. I hope we can all be level-headed, but it'll at least allow us to get through some things before a few people are stewing and steaming a little bit. If you guys are okay with that, let's.
We spent 13 minutes just on the topic.
That's right. So let's to your point of 3.02. Let's just for a few minutes. Can we take something out that's just historical in nature? Because my point that 3.02. 2 is a mouthful.
Yes.
And can we, I guess we ought to read it so we can say consistent what we're doing, or we really?
I don't think you have to read it, but 302, 1 and 2 is in there to show that the transition that was made back then about the places and that. And so you could eliminate 302, and we clean up 301 to eliminate the reference to 302. And back to your question, ma'am, about place or districts, all the council members here are elected at large, and to figure out
by place.
To figure out what number or place, some cities use districts, some use a place. And so each council person, including the mayor, is assigned a place. So on the ballot, the mayor, council member, place 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Sure.
So that's the only reason why the language is used as place.
No, I get that. I appreciate what you
Right.
said, but I'm just wondering, when do you change from place to be a district or a ward or a precinct? Is there
Are you
a
talking about
size of city? Is there
like a geographical?
Yeah, is there
You mean at large?
at large? Is thank you, Council. Is there a time for a different distinction that you do? Is it based on population? Is it based on?
It's based on the voters of the city. So
Okay.
if you wanted to have, for example, Richardson has most of the council elected at large, and I think there's 2 or 3 that have to reside in a particular district, but they're still voted at large by everyone. There's some cities like Farmers Branch that has single-member districts. Duncanville has single-member districts. Dallas has some single-member districts. And that means that the candidate has to live in that particular area of the city and is elected by those people, and not by all the people, just the people in that district. So
I'm just wondering, I don't know how anybody else feels about this, but when I think about at large, I think about no accountability. When I think about a single member district, or whatever the right terminology for that would be, precinct, ward, whatever, then yes, it is those people that live in that area that will vote for that person. Now there is a certain amount of accountability that has to be done, because if you're not performing that job, then those people are not going to vote you in again. I mean, possibilities are. But I just didn't know if there was a time for that type of distinction versus being at large. That's the reason why I brought it up.
Personally, I think it's whenever the people decide it is. I would say that in my time here, I've heard a number of people who believe that Woodbridge is out, has more representation than it deserves. Currently, there are no city council members who live in Woodbridge that I know of. And Woodbridge consists of almost 50% of the city. So, as a Woodbridge resident, I would benefit from districts perhaps, but I'm not honest. Me personally, I think there's some irony in that districts. I would agree that it would seem like a district, you'd have more accountability, and yet I believe that oftentimes, ironically, at large is more likely to be voted out than an individual district.
Voted out, or what did you vote?
An incumbent is more likely to lose an at large than an incumbent is to lose a district. That's my perception.
Okay, I understand.
That is my perception.
I understand.
I could be wrong.
I think that if you're elected by a geographical entity, then you tend to put your loyalties towards that geographical entity, and the benefits that would come from your decisions would affect that entity, and less so for the rest of the city. And I think that we're of a size that we need to think about making the best decision for the city as a whole, and not for this little geographic entity that we were voted in by.
Marty, you got a comment?
I like the at-large because everybody up there on that council is responsible for me, just not one person. So if I have a gripe, I get to talk to all 7 and they gotta listen, not just one. And Saxe is of the size that there aren't really distinct neighborhoods where people may not be getting listened to or may feel they're not representative because Woodbridge doesn't have anybody that lives there. But, you know, that's the American system where Woodbridge needs to get out and go from street to street and say, hey, nobody from Woodbridge is on the city council. We need to get somebody there. Like, there's nobody on the other side of Pleasant Valley, I don't think. So, you know, there are holes, and it's not perfect. But at least you know you got 6 people up there that got to pick up the phone when you call them. Because they are in some way responsible to you. And you can point your finger at them and know you're directing praise, criticism, something to somebody that, if they're doing their job right, should answer. You may not like what they say, but they have to answer.
I think I would agree. Saxy's at a size where in everyday life, you're going to run into all parts of Saxy. Whereas if I live in South Garland, I may never see North Garland.
Exactly.
And so it's almost 2 different cities. In that regard, Dallas the same way. If you're living down in Lakewood area, you may never see North Dallas because you don't need to get there. And so to have that representation, I think at a larger size, I would say it makes sense. I do like the idea that any city council member represents all of us right now. So at large for me, that's where at this size, I think a size starts to make the difference. We start going to districts because if we put districts in, I think now we introduce a whole other, well, how do you draw the district? Woodbridge isn't even an easy one because it's so large.
You have to divide.
And now, so where do I divide it? Divide down Wall Street or whatever. So I
Between
think
the homeowners and the apartment.
I think at large we do get the full representation. So just kind of where my thoughts are with that. Does that help?
It's just still my curiosity of
Yeah, sure.
when. So it's not a matter of population. It is a matter of the city deciding that they want to do that. I appreciate everyone's input.
Yeah.
I mean, I got free information. I wasn't asking for everything. I wasn't asking for your personal opinions. I was more of just wanting to see when that time comes, if it's a designated time based on size of population, number of industry you have, I mean, just whatever. And so it is not. But thank you.
It's right now in a charter. If we say, hey, we want to make this happen, and you go to the city council and try to convince them that that's what they want to do.
Basically, so
Right.
historically, before the change of 3.01 and 2, we had 7 members who were elected every 2 years, I think it was.
Yep.
All 7, every 2 years were up for election.
Oh, wow.
So you could theoretically have an entire
wiped
clean slate with nobody present that had been there before. And this kind of set the ball rolling of, okay, we're going to go to a 3-year term, and we're also going to roll them off so that they're evenly distributed other than the mayor falls in there. So like this year, we have 3 because of the mayor, but other years we have 2.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that part? I'd like to make a motion that 3.02, 1 and 2 go away.
But we still need 301.
Or no, 02, 1 and 2, not 01.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
3.02, yes, 3.02 either go away as much as it's allowed. If we can be completely gone.
Please, let me ask a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please go. No, you're fine.
Okay.
Don't apologize.
Is there a place for would there be another place, if not here, for that history of how those places and is it important for how the place 1, place 2, place 6, is it important for us to know that later on in any semblance of anything, because we're about to erase the history of how that came about? I'm just curious as to where you would put that.
It'll be in the prior versions of the charter, it'll be in the city records, and if we get rid of 302, 1 and 2, then we'd make some slight changes in 301 to indicate that the council is elected by place numbers. And so if you want to leave it in, you can. There's no harm in leaving it in.
Yeah. Do you resolve it by just updating the date? I mean, just saying any election, because the limit is really just calling out 94, but it still holds.
It's really important. It's very, very important that the terminology on the places be clear because when we get down the way and we start talking about the term limits, and we get that in there, I've been in a city where they had term limits, and there was a council member who served out and was going to be at the end of their term limits, termed out, and they ran for mayor, and the charter was not clear on how many sessions you could how many elections you could have as a council person, and how many you could have as a mayor, and how many you could have as both together. Sure. And it turned into a real mess. So we need to be very careful about that.
And that's really my point, because don't get me wrong, I love simplifying bylaws and charters, but an unintended consequence of removing granularity is exactly what this gentleman just described. Somebody's going to, it's in here for a reason. Right. And if all you need to do is just adjust the date.
To answer your question, the history is in the city archives.
Who's going to go to the city archives?
Yeah, exactly.
She's the keeper of the city archives.
City archives. That means that anytime someone wants to know, how did we get, who's sitting in place one? How did we get to, who is that? How is that? They have to go to the archive.
They go to Leah Granger and say, your public record.
What is the record retention there?
It's permanent.
Yeah.
Permanent. So if you can keep it if you want. I'm sorry I even mentioned it.
Well, no,
But if you get rid of it, then we would clean up 301 to capture some of the historical, so that council member elected to place one is elected this year and so forth, so that there would be some clarity in there about, because right now you'd have to go back and figure out, well, who was placed for, when were they first elected?
That's what we need to avoid.
That's what I would like to see that said, because we need an outline here. These places go for re-election at the same time those places, and how you're altering.
We've got to have something in the document, because otherwise it's going to be a crazy storm of who.
That'd be my ask of city staff to redline that.
What we might do is come back with a proposed revision that eliminates 302, 1 and 2, but clears up the historical standpoint in 301.
That would be my request, if that's okay. Just add that to part of our.
Where else do you have the actual where the place where we are for what year for what place?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Well, you'll have the prior charters, and you'll have the elections.
I understand that. I understand the prior charters will have that there. My question is, moving forward for my neighbor that may want to know who's in place 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the case may be, how would they know, okay, place 2 has been in place for 2 years, and their term is 3 years. And now I'm thinking about maybe possibly providing service for the city, or what happened.
Right. And that's what I'm saying is, in the cleanup of 301, we'd have that historical standpoint, so you know that this place is elected this time, this place is elected that time.
Okay, not necessarily from the get-go, but for whoever is in office at the time.
Right.
So if their term is 3 years.
Right.
So without a change of that, we can eliminate all of the dates from the equation because their term is for 3 years. It's a historical fact, and the city has to keep records that says that Mayor Mike Felix was elected on a given date. Each time he was elected, there is a record that says that there is that election. There's even, I suspect, a record that says how many for votes, how many opposed votes. All of that is forever and ever and amen. So none of it really goes away. Even stuff that's been removed from the charter prior, it's not gone.
Well, and that's all reflected in
It's all in. I mean, if you write to Leah, she can provide you with exactly what it said before May 11, 2013.
Yes, and all of this is the votes, Kirk, to your point, those are all listed in the ordinance when we canvass the results of an election. So that is cast into this stone of the city's memory forever.
It's in our ordinances.
Okay.
So
And-
why
and
do
each-
we- if I'm missing, what am I missing then? So why do we need this historical information in the charter?
You
It
don't,
has to be there
You need to
initially.
truncate it.
Moving forward.
moving forward, you don't, as long as we clean up 301
Yep.
to reflect
Okay.
who's on the staggered term as it
Yeah.
was. Because that's what it was that providing for staggered terms.
And Scott has requested that staff come back with a red line version of 301 reflecting the historic nature of 302. Is that the consensus of the group?
Well, that, I don't know, because we want to see it before we make a motion on it, but yeah,
Right,
that'd be my
right.
request.
Well, I think we
That
should
would be the
vote on
motion
it.
to
if we
do
want
So
that.
let me hold off on that, because that'll come back as we go to the end of this thing, so we stay consistent with what we're
So,
doing.
I mean, I would just make a motion that for the moment, we request staff to work up 301, 302 change, to remove 302 and make the other modifications and bring that back to us for a final approval.
Yeah, show us a draft of
I
that.
would second that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion or question on that? All in favor of that motion? Any opposed? Okay. Qualification of
Paul, were you
members.
opposed, or you just raised your hand for something? Paul, were you opposing, or were you just
No,
talking about it?
just clarifying something. Scott,
Okay.
you made a motion earlier to remove this,
Yeah,
so
so I guess
procedurally, you need to withdraw that.
I'm going to withdraw that
And then
motion.
you could make another motion.
And
if you want.
then Kirk,
I make the
But
motion.
we don't have to do it because we're not doing Robert's.
we're not in Robert's rules.
We're
but
not
yes.
in Robert's rules.
But that is what I would,
If you have
yes.
a motion on the floor.
Yeah, so I would say, here, let me back up. I'll rescind that motion. Kirk, you made a motion. His motion was to clean up 1 and 2.
Clean up one,
remove what
remove
needs to be-
302, clean up 301 as appropriate for that cleanup.
Okay,
then we will
and there's a
put on
second
the
to that?
agenda for you all to review. next
Correct.
meeting.
That's
At
right.
our next meeting agenda.
And you second that.
I'll second that.
And
Okay.
all in
Any
favor?
in favor with that? Any opposed?
Yeah.
Okay.
No opposed.
No opposed, okay.
That
Thank
only
you.
took 30 minutes.
Hey, we're rolling, right? Okay, qualifications of members. Yeah. In addition to any other qualifications prescribed by law, the mayor and each city council member shall meet the qualifications set forth in Article 5 of this chapter while in office. Is it fair to say we'll worry about that one in Section 5?
Actually, I think
Yeah.
it serves a different purpose. Like, Section 5 is about the qualifications for filing. This means that they have to maintain those qualifications while they're in office. So I think my opinion is it stands. It needs to stand.
No, leave it, yes.
Right.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not saying we're going to, leave it.
Right.
Yes. Any concerns in that one? Okay. Compensation. Jean, you want to read that section? and then-
Heck, yes, I do.
Okay.
Compensation of the members of the city council shall be determined by the city council by ordinance, but no increase in such compensation shall take effect commencement of the terms of mayor and/or council members elected at the next regular election. Members of the city council shall be entitled to reimbursement for actual expenses incurred in the performance of official duties.
Okay. I'm going to guess there's comments on this
I
one.
have a comment.
Okay.
Can we simplify that and just say they're not getting paid and compensation reimbursed for, compensation of the city council shall only be limited to actual expenses?
That last sentence is okay, is what you're saying?
Because this is a lot of words to say that they don't get compensated.
Yeah.
No, it
No,
does.
that's not what it says.
Gives
Well,
them the
currently it
ability to
allows them to
That's not what
change
it
the
says.
compensation.
Hang on, what it
Oh,
says
just-
is that they can be compensated, but the amount of compensation is set by ordinance,
Understood.
okay? And most councils don't vote for pay for themselves, okay?
Most don't.
But but there is a grammatical thing we have to fix in there if you leave it alone, but the intent is that if they if they adopt an ordinance that provides for pay, that it won't commence until the terms of them elected at the next election. So they pass an ordinance today saying everybody gets $50.
Yeah.
Well, it won't apply until the next election.
Right, but we as a charter can say that they don't pass that by saying that there is no compensation.
But if you do that, now, having said that, if you do that, that's your choice. If you do that, that means if the council ever wants to and the public wants to, then you gotta come back
You gotta
and amend the charter.
To charter you.
And
totally
state law only
I'm
allows,
okay with that.
Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
and state law only allows you to amend the charter every 2 years. And it has to be done at a uniform election date, which is in
I'm
May.
so comfortable with the legalese, but at the end of the day, if we have to put 2 steps in between compensation, that's fine. From my standpoint.
I personally would say, I mean, honestly, I think that the entire city should vote if the council's to ever get compensation. A reimbursement I'm okay with. I'm okay with a per diem when they're traveling.
Which they get.
But,
Which they get.
okay, they do just get a flat per diem.
Is that not correct? If they travel, they get a per diem?
That's set by
And they should.
federal government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
So
I
they
mean.
get reimbursed.
I mean, actual expenses slash or per diem is a little bit different.
Well, per diem is a little different, so.
A per diem is a
Some charters
flat
use
rate.
a per diem, like you get $25 or $50 per meeting. So if your idea is that they don't get paid, they just get reimbursed their expenses, then we need to change that.
Any comments? Billy, go ahead. Any comments on the compensation piece of it? Go ahead. On compensate, you got comment on compensation?
Just an observation. You know, where I'm at now, appointed board members oversee us. And they do get a minimal amount of money for showing up to meetings. And there's a cap on it annually. So it happens to be $50, probably doesn't need to be $50, but $50, and there's a cap per year. I think it's based on some computed number of meetings they attend. My only point I want to make to this group is that there's nobody getting rich doing it. And there's nobody laundering money, $50 a meeting or $25 a meeting. And the reality is, if you're on city council, when I elect somebody and I vote, and I elect like city council members, I like for them to go to places looking professionally. And if that means some dry cleaning bills, or a little bit of gas money, I'm not opposed to it. That's my only thing. So compensation doesn't mean anybody's breaking anybody, taking advantage of the citizens. I mean, it can mean just a little bit of something to help with gas money and dry cleaning bills, and it can be capped to some number based on number of meetings that are attended. So it doesn't have to be some incentive to take advantage of citizens. That's the only thing I want to say.
Carlos, go ahead.
Yeah, just for me, help me understand, have there been some abuse of this? And, it seems like we got a lot of passion about this. So
It's a standard issue that comes up.
Just trying to put some, just kind of regulate the control or put a structure to the control, or?
It's a standard issue. Any time the charter is amended and this item comes up, you arrive at that, there's always a bunch of hullabaloo over it. And if you look at the way it's written, the citizens have, if I'm on the council and I vote for compensation by ordinance and I say $1,000 a month, I don't get that money until after the next time I'm up for election. And the citizens have the right to say yes or no on that. They can vote me out. So,
the hullabaloo that you're talking about, the way that I look at it is a little differently. We're scraping on the EDC to just trying to find anything and anything available so that we can bring new businesses out here. And I feel that the issue of compensation is not really a big issue for me either, but there's a level of maturity a city needs to be at in order to be able to support that. So when you start to look at where we are as Saxe, I just don't think that we're mature enough to start looking at that remuneration of them serving.
So just based on what?
What do you mean based on what?
What data is there to show that that the city is in a circumstance where they?
Well, when you look at our sales tax and what we don't have available to bring new businesses in here, that data is available.
So what is that?
I would just I will say, I agree with you without data. My data point being how empty 78 is, how many empty buildings there are on 78, how
we've still got a lot of land that is just totally undeveloped. We've got.
Let's make sure we're gonna get ourselves off topic. I understand where you're going with this, Cedric. It's like, does the city have the funds to be paying city council members when we're still trying to do other things to get our
It's not
city?
just the funds, it's, does the city have the right set of priorities where we're paying them? Because the funds are there, I mean, we can pull it away, but what are we pulling it away from?
So I guess the question for us here today is, do we want to allow the city council by ordinance to say, hey, I want to be compensated? Or do we want to remove that ability for city council to do so? So that's where the discussion is, because Billy, I agree with you. I want city council to represent me well, the way they look. So if there's an expense to that, I don't have a problem with it. But that's just me.
And then the other question is there been a risk? And based on the gentleman's comment, there's no known risk at this point.
There hasn't been a discussion from city council or anything that I've seen at all.
No, and they'd have to pass an ordinance, which is going to be on the agenda. Everybody's going to know about it. Everybody in the community is going to be talking about it. So the likelihood of them doing it is probably slim and none.
That's one of the worst things that a city council can bring up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless they're elected by geographic districts and then they're redistricting.
Right, and the gentleman said risk. Well, the whole purpose of the charter is to reduce our risk. I mean, we're putting down things so that there's no black and white, right?
But you also have the ability to remove a council member, say,
right.
You can
theoretically.
And also you have the ability to propose legislation. You have the ability, citizens have the ability to propose legislation that could cause the repeal of that ordinance if they ever adopt it.
And again, we're putting together a recommendation.
That's right, it's recommendation.
We're not telling them this is what you're going to do, city council.
If you tell them no compensation, they're not going to.
They're not going to
go against that.
Exactly. That's exactly right. We're spending our wheels.
So again, I do know there is a grammatical error. You just said it right. It's like something's not quite right in there.
Yeah, until commencement.
So I would entertain a motion. If somebody says, no, we want to change this, or if you want to leave it to me, I'll entertain a motion as to what we do with the paragraph based on what people have said, and let's see where you're at.
I move that we leave the paragraph as is.
I second the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. There's plenty.
Okay, so I've got a motion, and one of the guys over here in the corner, I don't know who got it first.
I seconded it. Or anybody, I don't care.
So
there were plenty.
The motion on the floor in a second is to leave the paragraph as is. Can we say that fix grammatical error in it?
Sure.
Is that okay? Can we amend that? Would you mind amending that? Would that be okay?
No, fix any grammatical errors.
Okay, and you guys still second that if we do that?
I think the
Okay,
court still
all in
holds.
favor of leaving as is except for grammatical error, raise your
Aye.
hand. Any opposed, raise your hand.
Okay, I need.
Okay, so now, those are 4, raise your hand up here again. Okay, that's important, so we can see who we got.
Sorry.
No, those are 4, put your hands back up, sorry.
Yeah.
Those are 4, put your hand back, put your hand up.
If you're for leaving it alone, raise your hand.
Leave it alone, leave it alone, leave it alone.
8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay, and those opposed, please raise your hand, so we make sure we got
Those
1, 2,
ones,
3,
I need
4,
to hold up
5.
Yeah, because
Oh, you
she's
okay,
got
names.
to note who.
Okay, please,
Yes,
thank you.
cancel, yes.
It's everybody but the ones that have their hands.
Okay.
It's a public record.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we have a recording, but it is a lot easier if we edit
No, it's a whole,
it.
I appreciate it, thank you.
When you have no rules, it gets a little old west.
And I think that the point by Eric is a good point. This is a recommendation to the city
No
council.
formal rules.
So we kind of see what
Formal rules.
Okay, just want to
Okay.
clarify.
Yeah, no, there are rules.
We are
There's no
recorded.
rules.
Okay.
I don't want someone thinking
Yeah.
there are no rules here.
Okay. Section 3.05, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem. I'll read it really quickly. I will tell you again, after reading 5 or 6 other charters, this is very common language across all of them. Just if people wondered, hey, is this normal? This is fairly normal. Now, if you got changes, please speak up. The mayor shall be the official head of the city government. He shall be the chairman and shall preside at all meetings of the city council. The mayor shall have the same voting rights and responsibilities as the other members of the city council, but shall have no power to veto, He shall, when authorized by city council, sign all official documents such as ordinances, resolutions, conveyances, grant agreements, contracts, and bonds unless authorization has been delegated by the city council to the city manager or other official. The mayor shall perform such other duties consistent with this charter as may be imposed upon the mayor by the city council. And 2, the mayor pro tem shall be a city council member elected by the city council at the first regular meeting after each regular election of the city council members and/or mayor. The mayor pro tem shall temporarily act as mayor during the disability or absence of the mayor, and in this capacity shall have the rights conferred upon the mayor. Any questions, concerns related to these sections?
I do have a question with regards to Mayor Pro Tem. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear. They serve a year.
Yes, because every year there's elections, so
Okay.
every year the no election comes,
Yes.
a new mayor
Okay.
pro tem is then elected by the new city council, whatever it may be. Okay?
And there's no number of terms are the right, no number of times that they can serve as Mayor Pro Tem. It doesn't automatically
I don't
go
know
to
the, I'm
each.
assuming
No,
you can,
no, there's
if the
no
city
term
council keeps
limit.
electing.
No
a
term
new
limit, no,
pro
but
tem.
I'm talking about time. Like, say, for example, if.
You can be mayor pro
you
tem
come
for
around-
3 years
Yeah,
straight.
yeah, it's no big deal. It's no number of times that they cannot serve.
restrictions.
I'm sorry?
There are no restrictions. Historically, the council has simply gone
1, 2, 3,
4,
yeah,
5,
okay.
6, 1, 2, 3.
But they
4,
don't
5,
have
6.
to-
But there's nothing that says they have to.
Gotcha, okay.
And that election occurs after new members have been appointed to council and they've been sworn in, so you
Mhm.
have the new full council present, just
Yes.
from a
Yes.
sequencing perspective.
Yes.
So you have the fully new elected body in place.
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted the clarity on
No, I
that.
appreciate it, thank you. Any other questions on that one? Okay.
I just wanted to maybe have a word that inserted there to be clear on that last sentence there. The mayor pro tem shall temporarily act as mayor during the disability or absence of the mayor, and in this capacity shall have the rights conferred upon the mayor.
That's grammatically correct.
And in this capacity shall have the same rights that are normally conferred upon the mayor, or something along those lines.
I think the language is adequate. And all it's saying is, the mayor's absent from the meeting, the mayor pro tem runs the meeting. Mayor's not there to sign the ordinance, the mayor pro tem can sign the ordinance for the council.
So, and that's the spirit that I understand it, that's the way I understand it's written. It's just not saying that it's the same rights. It says, and this capacity shall have the rights conferred upon the mayor. So I'm not, it's not gonna be a hill that I'm gonna die on. I'm just saying, to me, it doesn't make sense as a citizen. It's not as clear as I would like it to be, is what I'm saying.
I think we're creating a problem right there, it's not one.
Okay?
It's over here.
Yeah. But I'd rather speak up.
Nope, please do.
Yeah.
That's what we want. Okay, 3 out of 6, vacancies, forfeitures, and filling of vacancies.
You want
Please, I'll take it.
Number
Please.
1.
You want to
Oh,
vote on 305?
yeah, I guess we can, each section here as we're going through, just because there's a lot into this one. 3 out of 5, entertain a motion to leave it be, if it, or to change.
Leave it.
Billy, to leave it as is.
Say leave it
Paul
as
with the second.
I'm sorry, who was the first?
Billy.
Billy.
Who's second?
And then Paul to leave section 3.05 as is. All in favor? Any opposed? No, you're in favor? Okay.
Unanimous.
It's unanimous. Okay, 3 out of 6.
And make sure the compensation was 9 to 4?
9 to 5.
9 to 5, 9 to 5, yes.
Section 306, vacancies, forfeitures, and filling of vacancies. Number 1, the office of city council member or the mayor shall become vacant upon his death, resignation, forfeiture of, or removal from office by any manner authorized by law. Number 2, if any member of the city council is absent from 4 of 7 consecutive regular meetings without explanation acceptable to the majority of the remaining council members, his office shall be declared vacant at the next regular meeting of the city council by resolution. In addition, any member of the city council who has been absent for 6 consecutive regular meetings due to any reason shall have his seat declared vacant at the next regular meeting of the city council by resolution. Number 3, Any member of the city council who ceases to possess the required qualifications for office or who is convicted of a felony or of a misdemeanor involving moral turpitude, or is convicted of violating state law concerning conflict of interest shall forfeit his office. Every forfeiture shall be declared and enforced by a majority of the city council. Number 4, a vacancy or vacancies in the position of mayor or council member shall be filled by a majority vote of the qualified voters at a special election called for such purposes on the next uniform election date as provided by state law. If the candidate with the highest number of votes in such special election receives less than a majority vote, then a runoff election shall be held between the two candidates receiving the highest number of votes. Such special and runoff elections shall be held pursuant to the provisions of the Texas Election Code and applicable ordinances.
I have several questions.
Okay. What section is it
Well,
specific?
let's start with section 1.
Okay.
The resignation. Is the resignation immediately invoked upon receipt? Or is it the council has to approve it before it is effective? Is this specified in state law?
It is covered by state law, and if I recall correctly, they tender a resignation. If they say, I resign effective X date, then it's X date. If they just say, I resign, then it's going to be effective 8 days. I think it's 8 days after that. I can check that for you. So,
But whatever state law
But
says.
that is
Trump will
specified
do.
in state law.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Carlos, and then we'll come back to you, Kirk. Oh, go ahead, Kirk. What's your next?
Okay. In section 4, it sounds to me like we have a contradiction. Special election called for such purposes on the next uniform election date.
Right.
My understanding is that there's 2 uniform election dates per year, one in May, one in November.
That's right.
The special election would be in any of the remaining 10 months. How can we have a special election on a uniform election date?
Would it be considered a special election because if that person resigns and their seat is not actually normally up for election at that time, that is considered a special election, but on a uniform date because normally that place would not be up for re-election?
Well,
is what I read.
When we had the last resignation, we actually had an election on a non-uniform date.
That's correct, because there is state law that says you have to have the election within 90 days.
So,
and that was actually an issue that we talked about, because that was going to be held on the next on the next election date, next uniform election date is what we were going to do, but we found out through state law that it had to be 90 days. That's why we had.
I would move that we strike on the next uniform election date from the charter. For clarity's sake, just strike that out and make it consistent.
That's in section 4.
Section 4, 306.
Or reword it to follow the state law, whatever that might be.
Or reword it to follow. I'd be okay with just deferring the law.
I was going to suggest call for such purpose on the next election.
As provided by state law.
Next election date as provided by law.
I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm not here to wordsmith so much as just, yeah, we've got this.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So your motion is to strike out next uniform in section 4.
Right, they'll provide the exact wording, but yes.
Uniform, okay.
Now, Mr. Chairman, if I could mention
Please.
something on 3064, a couple of years ago, the Constitution, because we have 3-year terms, we have some special rules in the Texas Constitution apply about if they run for another office, and about when we have to call election to fill a vacancy, as you mentioned. But the Constitution was amended a couple sessions ago to allow the city council to appoint someone to fill a vacancy depending on the number of days left in that unexpired term, if you follow me. Some cities have added that provision to their charter because absent that ability in the charter, they have to have a special election.
And they cannot leave it blank. They can't just simply leave it.
No, they're just.
So the choice is they can fill it or they have an election.
Right. But if they don't have into the charter the ability to appoint someone to fill that vacancy within that stated period of time, they have to call a special election. Now, there are two schools of thought. Some say, well, everybody should vote on it regardless of that. And the other school of thought is, why do we want to spend the money and have an election to fill a very short period of time? We can appoint somebody to step in those shoes. That came up in the city of Allen. Unfortunately, in the last charter amendment election, they added that in there. Said may appoint, didn't say they had to. May appoint somebody. One time they decided not to. Next time they got a former council member to come sit for a short period of time, rather than spend the money, go through all that election, only have someone serve. I forget what was it, 90 days,
But it could instantly confer the power of incumbency upon a person that's not elected.
That's true. That's why. The only reason I mention is that if you don't have that provision in there, then the council doesn't have that discretion. So if you're not in favor of it, I'm just mentioning it because I will mention it to the council if they have an interest in doing that. And I don't think, last time we amended this was in 2013, and that provision did not exist in the Constitution. So that's a new item that wasn't available last time we amended the charter. So,
if the council doesn't appoint somebody,
then they got to call election.
Okay.
No, I am.
Is the possibility of the position remains vacant?
That's not an option.
It's not an option. They're required to call election.
Okay, Jeannie, you had a comment?
I am absolutely 100% opposed to the city council appointing anyone because of the incumbency issues. 90% incumbency rate. I'm going to keep saying that until everybody hears me. That is a mountain that is almost insurmountable for people to and this is for incumbency. So I would absolutely be opposed to this.
Sorry, I brought it up.
That's all right.
It's important that if you don't and you change this,
then
then
you
just
to council.
open
I
to
want them
this.
to hear me say it out loud because this is something you said that you were going to bring up to council too.
I'm
right
not
to cherry
advocating
pick
one
it.
way or the other. I'm just letting them know.
That's exactly what we need, but we need to know.
The council has the right to cherry pick it, and I want them to hear me loud and clear that I am absolutely not in favor of this.
Make a motion.
I
will second it.
I don't.
The vote will go on the
I'll make the motion that we remove mixed uniform election date. We do not provide the power to appoint. Basically, we just simply remove the on the next uniform election date and go with whatever wording that.
Which state law covers that issue.
I mean, y'all want to clean up my wording a little bit, and I'm fine
Yeah.
with that, but I want to leave it as.
It'll only be taking out the word uniform. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Just if.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
So you have a motion?
I have a
Well,
motion.
that was what
to
we
strike
just,
uniform.
that was we already, well, we started voting, and then a question came up, because that's what the motion was previously, just to take out.
Well, I want to keep
uniform.
mine as is. I don't want to amend it to
Okay.
keep any.
Because that was what the previous motion was, and we just hadn't voted on. We had a discussion, so any other discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor of just taking out that word uniform for that, so we give that direction.
Who seconded that? I'm sorry.
The second over here, is it Billy or Marty? One of the two over here
I
in
did
this
it.
corner. Okay, any opposed? Looks like unanimous.
Right.
Okay.
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 Are there,
Go ahead.
Council knows.
Okay, Carlos, go ahead.
Are there a certain amount of regular it talks about regular meetings. Is there a set number? Is that just 12 once a month?
Well, it talks about it for where they have to meet at least once a
Okay,
month.
got it.
Yeah, that comes
But
up
they are
here.
currently meeting
309
Okay,
comes
so
up
that's
here.
24 meetings then.
Yep.
I'm just trying to put reference to this 407, that's all.
Okay.
And that looks like it's a running average
Okay.
for reference.
Got it.
And then all the gender neutral content.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we'll leave the, I would just leave the gender neutral.
We'll come to it,
as
yeah.
As a zone.
I would agree with that for now. We'll come back to it. Okay, 3.07, powers of the city council. Okay. That one's a long one. Are you guys okay if we don't read that one? But are there questions that people have? Just please reference the exact. Again, this is one that I've seen pretty common, but please, questions you have on 3.07.
Yeah, I do have one.
Please.
So Gina Nash was appointed, I'm not sure if it was appointed, but she's the EDC director. And the way that this is written, there's kind of an unintended consequence because it's only addressing the role of city manager. So effectively, if a city manager was removed, that's also the EDC director. I just feel that we need to make sure that, okay, you know, you got rid of me from city manager, but I still have the EDC role. So there is nothing here.
I think it provides, it's the city manager as long as she holds that office.
Yes, correct.
I think they have to take a separate motion currently.
Yeah, what I was going to say is probably, but it's not in here.
But it's not in this
It can't
section.
be in
I think
this
it's in the
section.
backboard
Yeah,
section. I want to look.
It would be in the article.
You saw it somewhere, because I even looked at the city manager section, it's not, the EDC is not represented.
That would go in at EDC because the EDC is a
That,
separate.
you know, that's.
I get that, but I
Okay.
think there's been a change where Gina is now the city manager and EDC. So how does that,
I think as an EDC, we've got to vote that because it's a different corporation.
okay.
So that'd be the EDC's bylaws.
Right.
Not in the city charter.
And I'll look it up, see if I've got the bylaws
If you
handy.
don't mind, because I think that that's an unintended consequence there.
But I think it
because some of those
says,
roles.
I think it says, as long as that person is holding that office. So if she's no longer city manager, then she can't be the EDC director.
Yeah.
But let me look at that.
Let's make sure, because I want to, that's the only question that I have, because we're approaching the city manager as if that's the only job that person does, but they also hold the executive director role. So
We
we
need
want
to
to
look
make
at
sure if
the
you remove,
EDC.
you got to remove both.
No, I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up, Cedric, because I had the same thought. Because again, the unintended consequences is, yes, she's
Right.
removed from the city, but now EDC has got no one, and we need to kind of know that
And
that's going
where
to
we
be
need to look at
happening.
the city
Yeah,
EDC.
yeah.
I'd agree. Thank you. Okay. Jean, you had a question? Or comment, please.
Truly a question, clarification. City secretary does answer to the city manager, or she answers to she reports to the council? Because I definitely misunderstood what was happening with the EDC. I thought that she had, with the restructure, that she had the ability to hire a fire director, not to assume that role indefinitely.
So the way,
No, well, she's a deputy director.
Go ahead.
the EDC bylaws relative to that issue say that it's the city manager's designee shall serve as the executive director. So she's not,
She can be the director or she could appoint one.
But if she's no longer city manager, she's no longer executive at the
Right.
And the new
So-
city manager would be able to.
so whoever the city manager would be, if it's no longer Gina, they would have the ability to serve in that capacity or appoint a position.
Okay. Other questions, please?
Okay, I have one more question. I had a call into Matt Robinson today. I don't think per state law, that the council has to adopt plats anymore. I think
But that was one of my,
okay, so planning and zoning, once we adopt a plat, it's approved and that's the end
I
of
was
it.
waiting until we got through that. I was going to mention that.
Okay, so please, any other comments before I go?
I'll just make a motion to remove, if
Letter I.
there's no other questions, right, I'll remove I.
Hank, we'll make sure everybody's listening.
Right.
Carlos,
there's a motion.
we've got a motion on the table to remove letter I from 3.07 because it's not something the city does anymore.
Okay, yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, so that's a motion. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, second here by Jim. All in favor? Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Okay, I have a question on.
I didn't oppose, I just didn't put it down fast enough.
Letter G, collectively inquire into the conduct of any office, department, or agency in the city and make investigations as to municipal affairs. I personally would like to suggest that that be collectively or individually.
No.
No.
There's another provision in the charter.
Which I will also suggest a change to as well.
But it'd be more appropriate there, because the reason I say that, you don't want, suppose you got a crazy person on the city council, okay? Just someone who just got elected and turned out to be a bad apple. If you made it individually, that person could go off and try to conduct all kinds of investigations. And that should be done collectively by the council, not by the individual member.
Or set up by subcommittees set up by the council of a group of 2 or 3. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
gentleman has a.
That's a pretty typical section in the charter,
but it's not that way across all of Texas. Rowlett, individual council members can go discuss and inquire, make inquiries to any city employee. They can't make any. All they can do is inquire and talk to them. They cannot tell them how to do their job or anything, but they have the right.
I thought we already had that somewhere else in the charter.
It's in 3.17.
There's another section that says that it's in section
17.
Which one?
3.17, investigation by city council. That's what we're talking about, correct?
No.
There's another one that says that all city council have to go through the city manager to discuss with any employee.
Billy, you should know this one off the top of your head.
It's been 7 years.
I know.
Well, from that part of the
308.3 prohibits 308 paragraph 3, except for the purposes of inquiries and investigations as provided by this charter, members of the city council shall deal with city officers and employees who are subject to the direction and supervision of managers solely through the city manager.
Right.
So between the two of them, both would have to be moved, but I personally would think that the city council should be able to ask questions to any city council, or any city.
Let me interject. It depends on the manager's philosophy. Most managers would say, hey, if you want to reach out to my staff and get information, I don't have any problem with that. The manager's trying to protect the workforce from political influence, to the extent it is political influence, and not overburden employees with having to deal with requests from an individual council member that may not be of interest to the balance of the council, so to control the workload. So it depends on the philosophy of the managers. Most managers will say, you can reach out, talk to any of my staff you want to get the information you need, because they're going to let me know that you're talking to you about something. And it's designed that way so that we don't have 7 different people reaching out, banging on employees about certain things. Not to say it doesn't happen. It happens a lot in the particular city I represent by a particular council member. And and then it raises issue with the other council members. Well, he's giving direction. Well, he's not. He asked for this information. So it's kind of a check and balance. But
in the interest of time, what we're doing, push your question to 17. That comes up, or is it 17 or 11? Investigation of City Council 3.17. Because if you want to make a motion, make a change in there, I think it's appropriate there. Is that okay?
Yeah,
that's fine.
Okay.
Because you have a city manager form of government, so the employees all work for the city manager, the city manager directs and controls them. So you can imagine if you have a big corporation and some board of directors decided he wanted to reach out to Johnny way down below in the echelon of that big corporation, and you can imagine if he had 7 people asking for 7 different things and preparing 7 different items. So it's a control.
Well, where I work, if somebody 5 levels up wants to come down and talk to me, nobody's going to stop that person.
And it usually doesn't happen, but
it doesn't happen, but nobody's going to stop them.
Okay, let's move that. I put it to 17, so please, you won't let us forget. I don't think so, because I think that'd be a more appropriate place if we're going to put it. In my own opinion, but that's the chairperson's opinion, not everybody's. So, any other questions with 3.07?
We are going to talk about it further. I do have some questions just to kind of...
The investigations?
Yeah.
Yes, on 3.17, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. There's nothing else for 3.07. I'd entertain a motion to leave 3.07.
We already did.
You already did? Okay, yeah. That's right, yes. Let's change the I, yes, thank you.
There's a motion to revisit it after 3.17?
The investigations at 3.17.
Yeah, you don't need a motion to do that.
Okay, the only reason why I say that is the word that, I want to understand 3.17, but the word that I have a challenge with is make investigations. So if we say that we want to strengthen 3.17 and remove the word make, because I think you can suggest, recommend, all of that, but having council people investigating, that's not their
role,
their background.
So just to clarify, so I'm a little confused here. Are we, so 317, how does that relate? I mean, the 307, 307G is talking about inquiring, to conduct an inquiry, which is different than an investigation.
But then they say they can make investigations.
Make investigations.
And make investigations as to this. Okay, so that's where you're tying that. As far as going back to making an investigation, you want to go review 317 and then come back to 307. Is that what you're doing?
We got to figure. Because I don't know the way to marry those two together. Because inquire, yes, make investigations, then you push to 17. I guess the only concern that you're bringing up, Kirk, is should they be allowed to do it individually versus collectively?
So 307G authorizes them the power to do such things, period, globally.
Okay.
317 will now can specify or limit what those things can be. So G is just authorizing the city council that they have the ability to inquire and do investigations.
Then I would leave, okay.
So, my opinion, leave it like it is.
Okay.
Because it gives them that power to do so. And then 317.
Collectively.
Yeah, not an individual.
Not individual.
Collectively.
Okay.
And even if it wasn't in there, they still have the right to do it.
Yeah.
They want to investigate the manager or
right.
the CFO, and they don't trust the manager to investigate the CFO. Okay, they could do it. They could hire someone to do it.
Okay.
Now, so G is you can do it. 17 is you can use all these elements or steps to do it.
Okay.
So
All right.
the original motion stands?
Stands.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, as I look at the clock, I'm going to go against what I said earlier. Can we stop here at prohibitions? And we need to touch term limits because we're going to run out of time. I don't want to keep us here past 9 o'clock, guys.
No,
That's-
right.
Yeah. So, is anybody have opposition to that?
I think, I'll speak up here. Can I go first?
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Leah and Lauren both mentioned earlier, we give you both credit, sorry, the L's are sitting right next to each other, that we could, if we don't get to it, we can extend it to the next meeting. So I don't think we should interrupt it. Let's just power through what we can, right? So that we can have as much discussion as needed and not feel like we're going to hit that hard stop at 9 o'clock. I mean, is that fair?
Fair.
May I make a recommendation?
Please.
Article 4 is still on our agenda for tonight. It's a pretty lengthy article to give you all the capacity that you want to discuss Article 3. We can move Article 4 to the next meeting to give you all the balance of the time to focus on Article 3.
I'm not sure we're even gonna finish our.
And that's okay. So
That makes sense.
Yes.
The whole point is to take some of the pressure off.
Yes.
And then I would also recommend that maybe we take a 5-minute break, let everyone stretch their legs, run to the restroom. I'm gonna try to make it
Okay.
warmer in here because it is freezing, so,
Okay, so let's,
Now, wait a minute,
let's, go ahead.
just to let everybody know, I have a huge issue with 311. I don't know if anybody else does,
Okay.
Yeah.
but there's gonna be a chunk of time.
Okay, so here's, let's take 5 minutes, go get drink, go to the restroom, please, as quickly as we can, so we can come back. We'll keep pushing along. I do think we're gonna have to move section 4 to the next time.
okay.
Because nothing says we have to.
It gets moved.
Yeah.
You don't have to do something.
The person who's in that office.
All right.
Because you can watch Dallas.
We're not missing
And you can see
anybody.
the word
We just got Charles standing there.
I'm gonna take care of my people. The hell with everybody else.
I'm looking for recording. For what I do, it's the fact that.
Oh, we back to recording?
True.
All right.
What I do.
Okay, we're gonna go to 3.08, and we're gonna, okay. This is prohibitions.
And we don't have any cleanup in there except for gender stuff.
On prohibitions,
Yes,
we're gender neutral and so forth.
yeah.
Yeah, because I read through it, it's very standard across many cities. Is there any concerns in the prohibition section?
I move that we accept the prohibition section as it's written.
I'll
with the
second.
exception of gender
Yeah.
only.
I'll second that.
And travel.
Second. Okay, so we've got a motion from Jeannie, a second from Marcia. Any discussion or questions? All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Unanimous. Oh, well, sorry, I didn't see that, sorry, Kurt, I was looking over here. Okay. Meetings of the city council, 3.09. This is where somebody had the question. City council shall hold at least one regular meeting each month and as many additional meetings as it deems necessary to transact the business of the city. The city council shall fix by ordinance the date and times of the regular meetings. Special meetings of the city council shall be held at the call of the mayor or a majority of the city council members upon provision of public notice in accordance with state law. And I guess the next, notice of regular and special emergency meetings of the city council shall be given as required by Texas Open Meetings Act. Questions or concerns relating to meetings of the city council?
Next page.
Did I miss something on the next page?
No. That starts with.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Marty, you got a question or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if this is correct or not, but I was told that city council agendas have to be out on the website the Thursday before the Monday. Is that correct?
72 hours.
Or 72 hours? Okay, there have been some instances where they haven't shown up on the website till Monday.
When,
About 3 weeks ago, and it was about 2.5, it was about 2 or 3 weeks running, or 2 meetings running. And that's why I finally asked the mayor.
I check that pretty religiously. You get this, you can sign up for an email. It's an automated email that'll come out on a Friday, I think, is when it comes out. Now, it's never immediately when it comes out, but when I've checked it Friday evening, I've never had it fail to look.
Okay, I'm asking.
That's my experience.
We have a city secretary.
I'd say,
here,
well,
so better,
she's here, she all of a sudden said, wait a minute, but let's, just for the sake of where this, I appreciate the question, but it doesn't have bearing on the charter.
Correct.
So I'm gonna move on from it, if that's okay.
Okay, why does it have bearing on the charter?
Because in the charter, there's nothing, they've gotta do something by special meeting, by Open Meetings Act. If they're not doing it, changing the charter or adjusting the charter doesn't impact the fact that they're doing it or not doing it. We
Okay.
should say, hey, is it being done? And we go question the people that are doing it.
Okay, so if it's not done, what is the recourse? I'm just curious.
It's a violation.
It's a violation of state law.
And you don't have a meeting?
And you're not supposed to have a meeting if you don't post the
Okay.
agenda 72 hours ahead of time.
So,
That's right.
Then, okay.
I would encourage you to call me if.
Well,
I've been posting them within the limit, but just give me a call.
All I do is go to the website and go to city council, agendas and whatever, and sometimes it's not there.
Yeah. Any other questions specific to this? Go ahead, Pete, and then you had a question?
I'll email you regarding this, because I do have a thought on it, on a technical perspective to send to you. So I'll make a note to send you an email.
Okay, in 309, 1, in that second paragraph, special meetings of the city council shall be held at the call of the mayor or a majority of the city council members. Someone might argue that if it could be called by a majority of the council members, that we were violating the Open Meetings Act, because now we got a majority and they can only act in open meeting. So I was going to suggest that maybe we change that to something less than the majority of the council.
Actually, I was going to suggest 3.
3, that was my number.
Here was, I just honestly think 3 members should have the power of the mayor for that purpose. So 3 members want a meeting, they can get a meeting.
Sounds good.
You making a motion?
I would make that a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, so there's a motion to change the second paragraph of section 1 of 3.09 to be at the call of the mayor or 3 members of city council.
Yes.
Okay.
With allowance that if they want to change slightly, then I'm okay with that.
Right. Okay.
Amen.
And there is a second to that. Okay, any other discussion or questions on that?
I would say
motion?
minimum of 3. 'cause it's-
Minimum of 3?
Well, you can't have 4.
You can't have 4 because otherwise then you violate it.
Okay, so start
Okay.
with
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other question, discussion on that? Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? That one looks unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Quorum 3.10. 4 members shall constitute a quorum. No action of the city council except as specifically provided in this charter shall be valid or binding unless adopted by the affirmative vote of a majority of the city council members present.
So that means we got to have
Please.
4 to have a meeting,
And 3 of those 4 have to vote affirmative for something to happen.
unless state law provides a different vote, such as when a supermajority vote or 75% vote, 3/4 vote is required.
Is the mayor considered one of the 4?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I move that
The
we-
mayor's just a special council.
I move that we make no changes to 3.10.
Okay. A motion to no change on 3.10. Okay, second?
I'll second
from
that.
Marcia. Okay, any other discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous with Carlos absent for the moment. So I guess he would be a, just no vote. I don't know how you vote, Carlos, because you had to step out.
You abstained?
Council, an abstention is a no vote.
Yeah.
We're not going by rules. He's just out.
You can ask him when he comes back though, right?
Yeah, we're not using them.
I'm not too worried. Okay, all right.
Little careful.
3.11, there's no discussion on this one, right, Marty?
Oh, no.
I'm just
I got
messing with
questions.
you, I know. Okay, so if you would read it, and then I'll allow you to ask the question or the concern that you have, please.
Section 311, conflict of interest. Do you need to take a vote since he's back? Should any member of the city council have a conflict of interest pursuant to state law with an agenda item then before the city council, he shall openly declare same before discussion proceeds, and he is thereby prohibited from discussing the item or voting on the question. Sorry, my screen went out. And is not considered as present and voting for the purposes of this tally.
Okay.
In the city council meeting 2 meetings ago, when the EOC guy got axed, one councilman, I'm assuming, put it on the agenda, seconded the motion, and was the deciding vote on an issue that directly affected him. And I was wondering why he wasn't conflicted out of that discussion. And if it's perfectly legal, that's just what
I don't know what the facts are of that one.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that 311 is a paraphrase of state law, Chapter 171, which local government code, which applies to the council, says that they can't participate in the discussion or vote on an item if they have a conflict of interest. A conflict of interest includes getting 10% of their gross income from the business or person who's asking for approval, an owner, a joint venture, being an owner of the property that's at issue, or being an owner in the business that owns the property at issue. So in that instance, they have to file an affidavit. It's a form that we use. They check off what the conflict is, and they cannot discuss it and they can't vote on it. So that's what 311 is talking about. I don't know what the particulars are of that situation.
My understanding is you'd think that he'd have political benefit from it, but that's not a conflict of interest.
Just go ahead, Jimmy, have a comment there.
I have a comment. I agree with what you say to an extent. Your last statement, or the last sentence of your statement said it had a direct impact on the councilman. That was not the agenda he was voting on. He was voting on removing another person from the EOC board. So it had no direct impact on the councilman.
Because he approached that councilman and accusations were made one way or another.
I would.
But that was
again. Hold on. Before we go too far, I don't disagree with this. There may be some issues here, but I want to keep it here. That's not related to the charter at this point. So I want to move.
Okay.
So address your issue.
Unless we're talking about changing the wording on this.
Right. So if that fact scenario, we don't need to discuss that fact scenario. If that fact scenario fit within 311, then that council member should not have participated in the discussion and voting. And that's what 311 is intended to do when you have a legal conflict. And state law also provides if you have a legal conflict and you can't participate in the vote, then that seat on the council doesn't count towards you if there's a required supermajority vote also.
So who makes that decision if it is a conflict of interest? You know, if I have a conflict of interest and I just say, no, it's not a conflict of interest, what can anybody do about it?
Well, it's a violation of.
They can file a complaint with the Texas.
They can go to the DA's office, Dallas County Public Integrity Unit, file a complaint. So it's a violation of the law.
Okay.
Question.
Marcia.
But what this speaks to, I'm just trying to get clarity. What this speaks to references state law. Referencing that is only because of a monetary or financial benefit. Based on what you said, I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear on what is a conflict.
Well,
so the definition of a conflict.
Regardless if we had regardless of having 311 in here, we still have the state law requirement.
And the state law is talking about monetary or financial gain.
Well, it's more than that. It could be your spouse. If your spouse has a conflict of interest, you also have a conflict of interest.
Sure.
And to answer your question, who is it up to determine that? It's up to the individual. But in what we do in training is we tell officials that, hey, if you think it's your brother-in-law that you forgot or you hate, or it's an ex-spouse, because as long as there's children living, it could apply. If you have an ex-spouse that has a conflict of interest, you ask your staff liaison, or you ask the manager, or you ask the lawyer. But if someone decides I'm going to do it, none of the peers say, hey, don't you have a conflict of interest? And they still don't do anything about it, then the remedy is they go to the DA's office and file a complaint.
So can we strengthen this wording at all? Because I'm sure that this is kind of the most vanilla that you can be on conflict of interest, because it evolves to ethics, criminality, and things like that. As the attorney, how would you recommend that we strengthen this to make it
I think the language is fine, because it talks about a conflict of interest pursuant to state law, which is Chapter 171, which could change over the years and has changed over the years.
I think the uncomfortable part is that nobody can read what state law is. I think that.
I personally read it, and honestly, it does not give a lot of room. It pretty much says that, for instance, even like when the mayor was up, when they were looking at naming this place after the mayor excused himself and left the room. His vote was no, because state law is expediently clear that it's not a political thing. Conflict of interest has to do with very limited rules, and if you're not within those rules, the state law says
Who knows what the
you
rules
can
are.
abstain. Well, unfortunately, you have to read the law.
Yeah, for example, a council person couldn't vote on a contract which he has a financial interest in. That's a violation of state law. And just so you know, historically, the old law used to be that you couldn't vote if you had a conflict of interest at all. And then the legislature realized in some of the small communities, everybody worked at the bank, okay? Or they all worked for the utility company. So when it came up to figure out who the bank depository was going to be for the city, or if they're going to buy power from the utility company, they were all conflicted. So the legislature many, many years ago came up with the rule that if you had the conflict, you had to abstain, couldn't vote. It didn't mean that you were ineligible to be on the council.
So do we have other policies that further provide, a definition and procedure at the level of the city or the county or something?
It sounds like they were
Yes, and there are other state law provisions. And when we do training with boards and commissions and with council members, we go through all this about Chapter 171. There's another statute, 176, which deals with, it doesn't make it a conflict, it doesn't make it illegal, but it was designed to let the community know who on the council was doing business with in the community. So if you or a family member has an interest in a business, or if you've gotten a gift from them, or a family member has, or if you have a family relationship with that vendor. If that vendor is seeking to do business with the city, the vendor is supposed to file a disclosure statement, and that council person, and it applies also to the city manager, has to file a disclosure statement. And so there are other statutes that increase the transparency of business relationships in the community. And it's also a violation.
To speak to your issue of strengthening this article,
I don't think
by strengthening it, you make it more specific, and there's a greater possibility that you leave something out. And once you leave something out, then it's unenforceable. If it's not covered by state law.
Well, all I was looking for was, why couldn't another councilman said, he has a conflict of interest in this, and we want to say he can't vote.
Yeah, I get the question, but is it germane to the charter itself? That's the.
I think that section is adequate, and I've seen that happen where a council member thought another council member had a conflict and raised it in front of everyone in a public session on TV, and put him back in the corner and eat. No, I don't. So
something you take the complaint to the DA's office.
So you can take him to the DA's office.
Okay.
So anyway.
Can I just make, I'm very empathetic to the fact that, hey, go read the state law on conflict of interest, but can we at least put which one? Because that's a whole lot.
I get behind that.
Yeah.
I'm definitely
No,
behind
that's-
that, to reference what the state law is, because those don't change that often, do they? They're not gonna change what state law does conflict of
You know what I'm
interest.
saying?
So-
I know,
You
but
said where to reference it,
Yeah,
because it needs to be
so-
some more
Make
meat on the
motion.
bone,
So,
I really do.
As I understand the question is, he wants it so that when somebody reads this, they know what state law to go look at. They don't have to go Google and start from scratch.
Do those chapters change designations around here?
They can change, but I mean, we could, as provided in Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 171,
As
or
of X
successor,
date.
or other state law, because they may enact other state law.
Sure.
Right.
Or amend, right? And there's 23 references to state law in this document.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have the actual citation for reference.
I have another thought, and I'm just raising it because I think that just thinking
No,
about.
go ahead. I
No.
was just looking for information.
No, I'm just gonna use what you said, and I understand what legal has said as well. The way I look at things is the look of an impropriety. It looks, something looks questionable. That, I just wonder if something, when I say there needs to be some meat on that bone, because the look of an impropriety is what you want to stay away from. It could be legal, it could be okay, it could be whatever, but the look of it, the optics of it, and is there anything that can be addressed from that standpoint? I'm not trying to get in additional hot water, I'm just trying to see what other kind of verbiage that can be put in there to really protect, because no one wants the look of something. State law could be, six and one half dozen of the other. But how can you avoid the look of something, the optics of something, to help that out?
Not a
That's maybe
violation.
the hard part about that is are we trying to make it to avoid the optics of it? Your view of optics is different than my view of optics.
Sure,
and so that's, if you start doing that now, you've got yourself even deeper.
Okay.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but just because I just think that's why you've got the DA's office, that's why you got the state law, and you go with it, because we got to put, as skeptical as everybody is about what's going on, state, national, everything else, we got to put a little bit of faith in them that they're going to do something right.
I will say the penalties of doing this as a council member are severe.
Okay.
Very severe.
If anyone ever brings
If you're
that.
if you're brought up,
that's
you're convicted.
Dallas County DA's office is not shy about taking
No,
complaints.
and it's,
And
it's very severe.
if you're concerned about the penalties, but only if somebody complains about it, increasing the penalties in the bite in here won't do anything unless somebody complains about it. So,
the state law supersedes it.
That's true.
So
Did you want
no motion, because I don't want to have to change everything, but
Okay.
I'm just curious, it was just a discussion.
No, I appreciate it, Ken.
So
Okay.
you want to add a reference to the state law?
You know what?
I think it'll make it where the rest of the document needs to be revisited. Why this section and not that section?
Why does this one
So,
reference a specific
out of
program?
curiosity, could we do a single thing to simply add references, known references to state law and categorically across, because there's other places where it references state law.
Eric said
Not all
maybe-
a few places they actually specify which law with the and other laws, but
Almost like a citation.
yeah, kind of like a citation
What-
thing, or, and it may not even need to be in the charter, maybe
That
it
was
could
gonna be
just
my
be
point.
on the website. I don't know
That-
how much room we have to do that, to where it could just be added to the website to say, if you're reading the charter on the web, there's a citation to where you might go to find out more information about this.
We can absolutely do that.
That would be, that's where I was going to go with it. Not be part of the charter, but they're available, makes it
I think it'd
easier.
be great if that could be done. I mean,
That might take a little bit of time. but as
I
we go through
understand,
this
'cause it takes
process-
time to find that. I
So you
mean,
got about 2 weeks?
Well,
No,
if it's not part of the charter, there's not a timetable to it.
Well, but, I mean, if somebody's gonna take the time to go and find all those citations, why wouldn't you put the citation next to state law here?
Because every time that changes in state law, then we've got to update
Yeah.
our charter to match what happened in state law, and we know how they change state laws. Because otherwise, our charter is out of compliance with what state law says. Or we're
well,
referencing,
typically
we're
they
referencing
say more
something
under
different.
state law, but yeah, it would eventually go stale.
The whole point is that you already have state law that prohibits that conduct. Why do you need to repeat it or clarify it in the charter?
I think,
Because you have section 311.
well,
But I'm saying, I think it reads fine. If you want to add reference to a particular statute, we can do that. But I'm just saying that we already have state law that governs that kind of conduct. And, liars will lie and cheaters will cheat. Regardless of how many rules you have, no matter how strong your code of conduct or code of ethics is, People will lie and they will cheat if and when they want to.
Ignorance
that's
of the law
somebody
is
brings
no
it up.
excuse.
So I guess I'll entertain a motion related to this section then as to what any of you guys are thinking, so we can.
Yeah, just shoot me down. I'd like to make a motion that we keep it as is.
Second.
Any discussion, or you got a question? But I got a motion by Cedric and a second here by Butch.
To leave as is, and no one else is gonna go in there and try to find all these references to every comment.
Well, that's not to say that city staff couldn't.
If city staff decided to do it separate of the charter, they
It would be
could.
separate from the charter.
Exactly.
Separate, okay, well, I just
If
wanna
that's
make
a
sure, I mean,
communications piece that we can put out, that is certainly something we can do.
I mean,
Okay.
technically, this election of May 13, 2006 is not part of the charter, it's an annotation, correct?
It's an annotation.
Okay.
This
Yes.
is just an annotation, it's not actually
Annotation.
part of the charter.
So,
Okay.
so when we go to reprint, assuming we make amendments and it passes, when we go to reprint it, we could put an annotation in there about the section.
Is everyone comfortable with that?
Is everybody? Joe?
Just a comment, that would have been so incredibly helpful when I was doing all of my research when it came to the townland's petition as well. I dug through, I'm not an attorney, I'm a freaking realtor. And so to dig through all that state statute and try to figure out what was applicable and what wasn't was incredibly difficult.
Okay. So we've got a motion on the table from Cedric and a second from Butch. Any other comments, questions to it?
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Oh, wait a minute, the motion is to don't do nothing.
Correct.
Is leave it as is. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay. Abstention, should any member of City Council choose to abstain from voting on any question before the City Council where no conflict of interest exists, his vote shall be recorded as a negative vote in the official minutes of the City of Saxe. Comments or concerns about this?
I just ask, is that a common practice?
It's not.
It's unfortunate it's not, but I like it.
It's all over the board.
I like it. Because it forces them to fish or cut bait.
Well, my opinion on it, and I, again, this is not, strong opinion, I'd almost like it to be, if you abstain for no reason, it's a positive vote. Okay, because you can become an obstructionist, just on purpose for the sake of it. You're always voting no.
Yeah, it's one or the other.
Again,
but they can avoid it by just not showing up at the meeting.
Exactly.
I don't disagree. But there's cities are all over the board on it.
right.
So.
And again, where no conflict of interest exists.
Yeah, this is where no conflict of interest. You can say, you know what, I still want to vote. Well, great, you just voted no.
So although the cities are all over the board, is there a better practice of how we should approach this, or is this fine?
No, I think it's good. It's just a question whether you want to say it's a positive vote or a negative vote. That's just,
yeah.
I tend to agree with Scott, what you said. It could be interpreted as an obstructionist type move because you don't want to get out there what you don't feel about something. If you're on council, everybody that sees it or is in the audience should know how you feel about the topic. And I would agree that it should be a positive vote if you want to abstain.
That's what I like about the electronic voting. I can't look down there and see how Paul is going to vote before I cast my vote.
Yeah.
So to make sure I'm clear, are we saying change that to instead of negative?
Well, just I have made a motion, but yes, we change it to where if you abstain with no conflict of interest, you're saying, you know what, I just want to abstain for this for the sake of abstaining,
Sure.
then in just the way that I've thought about it, says it's a positive vote, because a lot of times you're abstaining because you're just like, I don't want to know, but it's okay if it's a no.
That'd be a super simple way for everybody to pass something while claiming they didn't do a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would be opposed to that because I think basically nothing forces anybody to speak up. I mean, let's face it, you cannot compel a member to vote. Well, maybe we could. If we can compel them to vote, then we should just compel them to vote or not be there. Otherwise, they could pass something. They could pass compensation through abstention.
Hold on.
All they got to do is get a motion on there, then everybody abstains, and it passes, and nobody voted for it.
well, wait a minute, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but if they abstain, they understand when they're sitting there, it's a yes vote.
Or
So
a no
yes,
vote.
Or a no vote.
Or no vote, right.
Right. So even though they're abstaining, it's registering one way or the other. Am I misunderstanding that?
That's what, right now it's
So-
registering. as
So it's
no.
not that they did nothing.
But his point is that you want
If
to.
everyone abstains.
Game the system.
Yeah, gaming the system, because if you abstain, you don't have a conflict, it goes down as a no vote. Well, if you change it to a positive vote, then he's just riding along with the people, that I was really for it, but I wanted to show my constituents that I was a no vote.
But it's not a no
Carlos?
vote.
I know.
It is right now.
In 3
Hang on, he
months,
said-
nobody remembers that it's a 7-1 vote.
Yeah.
You can stand up and say, I didn't vote for that. And nobody goes back and checks the record.
Right.
Okay. Carlos, you had a question or point?
I was just gonna make a motion, but.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead,
Okay, sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't like the potential for the unintended consequences to flip it into a positive
Okay.
with a no vote, so
Okay.
I prefer to just keep it as it is.
That was my motion, I make a motion to keep it as it is.
Second.
Okay, motion by Carlos to leave it as is, second by Billy. All in favor? Any opposed?
No, it's
You
fine.
want it switched up?
Hey,
Yeah.
it's okay.
You want it switched up?
I have mine. I support your right.
Sorry to leave you hanging out there.
I'm offended by every last one of you. You can leave now.
It's still American.
Yeah.
You support his right to
Well,
Okay.
I didn't say that. I support, disagree with you.
See if we can. We got 10 minutes. See if we can get through a little bit before swinging in. 3-13 Rules of Procedure. The City Council shall conduct its meetings in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order. The City Council shall determine its own order of business. The City Council shall provide that the citizens of the city shall have reasonable opportunity to clearly hear and be heard at public hearings with regard to specific matters under consideration. The City Council shall provide for minutes to be taken and recorded for all meetings as required by law. Such minutes shall be a public record and shall be kept and maintained by the City Secretary.
I have a question.
Okay?
Okay, this was previously used before state law changed to exclude citizens from speaking on non-voting items. At the workshops, citizens were not allowed to speak as a general rule because they weren't voting on anything.
That's changed.
State law has changed that, so the way I understand this, it is in conflict with the state law because state law says not just matters under consideration, but matters of discussion. If they discuss it, as a citizen, I have a right to speak.
Okay, let me go through this. First of all, I recommend you take out the first sentence about Robert's Rules of Order. Because Robert's Rules of Order really don't have any application to the City Council. And if anybody thinks they're an expert on Robert's Rules of Order, we can spend 12 hours talking about it.
If you think you are, deny it right now, please. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, next point is, council determine its own order of business. That's fine. That's about the agenda. City council shall provide that citizens of the city shall have a reasonable opportunity to clearly hear and be heard at public hearings. Public hearings, okay? Regard to specific matters under consideration. So if it's a public hearing, they're required to give an opportunity to speak.
Right.
Now, you are correct. Until session before last, unless the charter provided a visitor section or a citizens appearance section, if the charter didn't provide it or the council didn't do it by policy or ordinance, citizens did not have a right to address the council on items on the agenda unless it was a public hearing, because it's their business meeting, and your right to address your grievances against your elected officials is to reach out to them, not to wait till the council meeting and try to speak then. But 2 sessions ago, the legislature passed the right to speak law, which is in the Open Meetings Act, and says that a citizen has the right to address the council on any item on the agenda that's on for action. So if it's just a discussion item, that law doesn't apply. So if it's a work session, it's a work session. If it's a work session and has an action item, it's not really a work session because it has an action item. So the new law says that citizens have a right to speak on any item that's listed on the agenda for action. The law allows the council to say you can speak at the time we call it up on the agenda, or they can say you got to sign up to speak on that item. They can say that you can only speak to that during the visitor section, for example. And that's the only time the state law requires them an opportunity to speak at the council meeting is on an action item and on public hearings, because state law, when we have zoning cases, for example, some plats require public hearings, then they have a right to get up and speak, say what they want to say, and then sit down. So in those opportunities where they get an opportunity to speak to the council on an item, it's not a Q&A session. And I've been to enough Saxon council meetings and gotten after the mayor, and it's not a Q&A. Well, we like to hear. Well, the idea is to get up and speak, have their say, and they sit down. But I've been at some of those meetings where somebody else got up and spoke, and then well, I want to come back up. Okay, come on back up. I mean, the idea is get your say in, and then sit down, and then get on with the action. So, for example, if they have an executive session item, and they come out and they're going to take action, if someone signs up to speak or wants to speak to that item, before they take action on that item coming out of the executive session, they have the right to speak. But it's not items that are on there just for discussion.
So aside from taking out that first sentence, then
I
the
think
rest
it's
of it
fine.
does not, the rest of it is kosher with state law.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I do have a quick question.
Okay.
The vague word called clearly.
Well, yeah, that's
The vague word called clearly.
Yeah, I mean, who defines?
Can we
it's
take out the
clear?
word clearly?
you say an opportunity to be heard.
Yeah, who defines clearly? Because anyone can come to us and say, it wasn't clear, you guys are violating the charter.
Does that mean we have to pass out hearing aids to everybody?
Well, no, I'm just, I mean,
No,
normally those types of words are left out of this because, you know, an adverb clearly, who defines that?
So can we then, if you will, take out opportunity to be heard?
Clearly here.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
so
I'm
read-
saying to clearly hear and be heard.
But no, it should say reasonable opportunity to be heard.
Yeah,
To be
that's what
heard.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
I only had one question about the expanded open meetings law.
Yes, sir.
I thought that it was whenever they had a quorum, and so they were in
It'd be
the meeting,
They have
they're
quorum to
subject to
meet.
open records, and any item that they were discussing, which meant even in a workshop.
No, sir. It's only action items.
Okay, only action
That
items.
now your local policy may be different. Like I described where I've been at many meetings where it was like you know, everybody popping up every now and saying something, but under the new law, it's only action items listed on there for action.
Okay. My apologies, Leah.
So one other point, I think I may have misunderstood. Are you saying that that sentence there should be, the city council shall provide that the citizens of the city shall have a reasonable opportunity to be heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, there's also other, for instance, technology nowadays, where there may be a virtual, someone who may not be able to attend. So they should be able to clearly hear.
That's covered by other.
If you have a problem with clearly, what's the problem with reason?
That's covered by other state law. If, for example, we do a video conference, if back in the COVID days where we're doing it all remote, the rules were relaxed during COVID, but now we're out of the COVID, it's not relaxed. So if there's a video conference meeting, then everyone at the meeting and all those people remote have to see the faces and see and hear all the conversation. Otherwise, you can't do it. So there's already state law that requires that they be able to hear the discussion. So if you've got a council member participating remotely, someone in the audience got to be able to hear and see, and that person remotely's got to be able to see and hear the council and the public.
Okay.
So you got state law that takes care of that.
Well, but this doesn't say anything about state law as far as hearing.
But you don't need to. That's talking about public hearings.
That's what I'm saying. So if we're in a public hearing and there's 200, 500 people there in the room and I'm not able to hear, they should use a microphone or something else to be able to clearly hear what is being shared in the hearing, right? And so I'm not gonna, again, I'm just saying, to me, I don't think we need to change anything here, is what I'm getting.
You're talking about the ability to hear the council meeting.
Yes.
It's not, and the
That's
public
what I
hearing is
think
part of
this
the
is
council
saying.
meeting, but
You can make a motion.
I hear what you're saying, but
I don't think we need to change anything, is what I'm getting at.
Make a motion.
Bill, you had your hand up.
I did, yes. Clarification, this section is the section by which the citizens get to tell their city council, this is how we want you to conduct your business. And I hear you on striking the Robert Rules of Order, because the reality is nobody really knows how that works. Nobody does it right.
Right.
But if that's struck and a particular council member decided they wanted to be disruptive in a meeting, or somebody else wanted to be disruptive in a meeting and obstruct the conduct of business, without having something in here, is that more problematic than having something in here about Robert's Rules, which clearly
No,
indicates
because-
we want you to conduct your business clearly, and then this is, without taking that out of the charter, I guess, now the charter doesn't tell council members and the
yeah,
council
but
as a whole.
the mayor controls the meeting. And if the mayor's not controlling the meeting, then another council member goes, Mayor, you need to control the meeting. Okay, I make a motion that X, Y, and Z happen. So you have the ability to control the meeting. You don't need to have Robert's Rules of Order because you can make a point of order anyway. Regardless of Robert's Rules of Order, a motion is made in a second, and they continue on the debate. You go, point of order. Then you got to have a motion on whether to continue the discussion or not continue the discussion.
Problem with Robert's Rules of Order is everybody thinks they know how the Robert's Rules of Order
And nobody
are,
does.
and they're all different.
My thought is, if you quote Robert's rules to establish your spot and you're wrong, it could get expensive.
Okay.
My spirit of my question is, striking it out is fine. Would it be prudent to put something in here to indicate that they are to conduct their business in a
Quarterly.
professional, workmanlike manner or whatever? But that's okay. I trust you. I trust you.
Billy, you know now that the right to speak law says we can't control what they say.
That's right.
They want to say bad things about bad people.
So I motion that particular section, 3.13, remain the same with the exception of striking out that first sentence.
The Robert's Rules of Order sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Second from Kurt. Any other question or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Keep your hands up if you opposed. Carlos.
Hey, put your name tag back up.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a wrap.
You're not on duty yet.
Okay.
I got an early pitch in the morning.
Just to clarify, that was to strike the first sentence but leave everything.
Leave everything else as is. Correct. Okay. We are at 9:02. Does anybody have any objections to stopping? We start at 3.14 when we come back next week. Because it is next week, isn't it?
Yes.
It is a 7th. Yeah, so it is a week from now, and then we go a month between that.
Next Thursday.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's because of the timing. I knew you had to squeeze these two, and then it's a month each in between each one.
But we have a timeline, and I want to keep you guys on track. I want to make sure that you have enough buffer should you need more time.
Yep.
So best you can be here next Thursday. I will not do another back-to-back meeting, I promise.
Oh, I'll be here.
Okay.
So we start back at 3.14.
Start back at 3.14.
Finish, and then we go back to 301.
Yes, yes.
I would suggest that we not read the sections out loud.
That's fine.
It could save us some time.
Yep.
I have a question for the group, just from a procedural standpoint. I set this meeting to run from 6 to 9. We can, it's up to this group. We can go as long as you all want, or we can put a hard stop in. I just need to know what the group's consensus is.
I don't think
I think we need to.
Yes, 3 hours is a lot.
I think we need a hard stop. If we get a few months from now, we're way behind, then we may have to make a change.
It's okay.
Okay, then I would, then.
Is
if
pizza
nobody's-
okay?
What's that?
Pizza okay?
Pizza
Yeah,
okay?
Pete's fine.
I like steak and prime rib myself, but I'll do pizza. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you guys.
Now, do we need to read?
Articles as they see fit.
Get it, yeah, the next meeting, if you put 4, or it's a remainder 3 through 8, that gives
I'll try to
plenty.
get you guys caught up, and if you don't get there, we'll keep rolling balance. Is
Okay.
that fine?
Okay.
Yes, sir.